The collapse of Yuji power in their ancestral homelands began with a series of devastating military campaigns that would reshape the political landscape of Central Asia for centuries to come. In the Gansu Corridor, where the Yuji Confederation had controlled the lucrative trade routes connecting China with the western regions, their fortified settlements and pastoral territories faced relentless pressure from an expanding Xiongnu Confederation under the leadership of Modu Chanyu around 176 BC. The Xiongnu forces, employing superior cavalry tactics and coordinated siege warfare, systematically dismantled Yuji defensive positions across the corridor's narrow passages. Archaeological excavations at sites like Yumen and Dunhuang have revealed layers of destruction dating to this period, with burned granaries, collapsed defensive walls, and scattered bronze weapons indicating the intensity of the conflict. The Yuji, despite their reputation as formidable mounted warriors, found themselves outmaneuvered by Xiongnu military innovations, particularly the use of composite bows with increased range and penetrating power. Chinese historical records, notably the Shiji compiled by Sima Tian, describe how the Xiongnu forces killed the Yuji king and fashioned his skull into a drinking cup, a practice that demonstrated both the brutality of the conquest and the symbolic importance of completely destroying Yuji leadership. The displacement from the Gansu corridor triggered a massive westward migration, involving hundreds of thousands of people, livestock, and portable wealth accumulated over generations of controlling Trans-Asian trade. The Yuji Confederation, organized into 5 distinct tribal groups known as Yabgu, moved their entire society across the harsh terrain of the Taklamakan Desert and through the mountain passes of the Pamir Range. This migration differed significantly from typical nomadic seasonal movements, as it represented a permanent abandonment of established territories in the search for new lands capable of supporting their complex pastoral economy. During their westward journey, the Yuji encountered and displaced the Saka peoples who had previously dominated the regions around the Amu Darya river system. The Saka, themselves skilled horsemen and warriors, were forced to migrate further south into the Indian subcontinent, creating a cascade of population movements that affected territories from the Aral Sea to the Indus Valley. The Yuji military superiority during this period stemmed from their adoption of heavy cavalry techniques, utilizing armoured horsemen equipped with long lances and reinforced leather armour that provided protection, while maintaining mobility across varied terrain. The 5 Yuji tribes established distinct territorial divisions upon reaching Bactria around 135 BC, each maintaining separate administrative structures while acknowledging loose confederate leadership. The Kushan tribe, initially one of the smaller groups, secured territories in the northern regions of Bactria, where they encountered the remnants of Greco-Bactrian civilization. The Syumi tribe controlled the western approaches to Bactria, maintaining contact with Parthian territories and facilitating continued trade relationships. The Guishuang, Shuangmi and Dumi tribes divided the central and southern regions, each adapting their settlement patterns to local geographic and economic conditions. The transformation from nomadic pastoralism to sedentary agricultural society occurred gradually over several generations, driven by both practical necessities and opportunities presented by Bactrian infrastructure. The Yuji discovered extensive irrigation systems, urban centres, and agricultural terraces that had been developed under Greco-Bactrian rule, providing a foundation for more intensive agricultural production than their traditional pastoral economy could support. This transition required significant adaptations in social organisation, as nomadic tribal structures based on kinship and seasonal movement patterns needed modification to accommodate permanent settlements and territorial administration. Archaeological evidence from sites like Halkayan and Dalvetzin Tepe reveals the gradual adoption of mud brick architecture, permanent storage facilities, and workshops for metalworking and textile production. The Yuji began incorporating local artisan populations into their social structure, learning techniques for bronze working, pottery production, and architectural construction that enhanced their material culture beyond traditional nomadic crafts. This cultural synthesis created distinctive artistic styles that combined nomadic animal motifs with Hellenistic decorative elements and Iranian symbolic systems. The Kushan tribe's emergence as the dominant faction within the Yuji Confederation resulted from a combination of strategic territorial control, military innovation, and diplomatic skill. Their northern Bactrian territories provided access to both the Oxus River trade routes and the mountain passes leading toward the Tarim Basin, allowing them to maintain connections with their former homeland while exploiting new commercial opportunities. The Kushan leadership demonstrated particular skill in managing relationships with local populations, incorporating Greco-Bactrian administrative practices while maintaining their own tribal authority structures. Kujula Kadphises, the first historically documented Kushan ruler, consolidated power through a series of military campaigns against the other Yuji tribes during the mid-1st century AD. Rather than simply conquering rival territories, Kadphises implemented a policy of gradual absorption, offering defeated tribal leaders positions within an expanded Kushan administrative hierarchy. This approach preserved valuable military expertise, while creating a more unified political structure capable of coordinating large-scale military operations and territorial administration. The archaeological record from Tilia Tepe, discovered in northern Afghanistan, provides extraordinary insight into the cultural synthesis occurring within Yuji society during this transitional period. The 6 tombs, dating to the 1st century AD, contained over 20,000 gold ornaments and artifacts, representing a remarkable fusion of artistic traditions. Nomadic animal-style decorations appeared alongside Hellenistic portrait medallions, Iranian fire altar symbols, and Indian Buddhist iconography, indicating the cosmopolitan nature of Yuji elite culture. The burial practices revealed at Tilia Tepe demonstrate the preservation of nomadic traditions within an increasingly sedentary society. The deceased were interred with weapons, horse equipment, and portable wealth, maintaining connections to their pastoral heritage, while incorporating new luxury items acquired through trade and conquest. Gold belt plaques depicted traditional nomadic scenes of hunting and animal combat, but executed with sophisticated metalworking techniques learned from Greco-Bactrian craftsmen. At Ai-Khanum, the Hellenistic city founded by Alexander's successors on the Oxus River, archaeological layers from the Yuji period show the adaptation of existing urban infrastructure to nomadic social needs. The gymnasium was converted into workshops for leatherworking and metalworking, while the theatre served as a gathering place for tribal assemblies. The city's defensive walls were reinforced and expanded, incorporating nomadic military engineering techniques with existing Hellenistic fortification principles. The cultural transformation evident at Ai-Khanum extended beyond mere architectural adaptation to encompass fundamental changes in economic organisation and social structure. The Yuji established new market areas designed for livestock trading alongside existing commercial districts focused on luxury goods and agricultural products. Coin production resumed under Yuji control, but with modified iconography that combined Hellenistic royal portraiture with nomadic symbols of authority, creating a distinctive monetary system that reflected their hybrid cultural identity. Iranian cultural elements entered Yuji society through multiple channels, including intermarriage with local populations, adoption of Zoroastrian religious practices, and incorporation of Persian administrative terminology. Fire altars appeared in Yuji settlements alongside traditional nomadic ritual spaces, while Persian-style royal titles began supplementing traditional tribal leadership designations. This Iranian influence became particularly pronounced in the Kushan territories, where proximity to Parthian regions facilitated cultural exchange and diplomatic contact. The gradual consolidation of Kushan power over the other Yuji tribes involved both military conquest and cultural assimilation strategies that preserved local traditions while establishing centralized authority. Kushan rulers adopted the title King of Kings, borrowed from Persian imperial tradition, while maintaining nomadic customs of tribal consultation and consensus building. This dual approach allowed them to govern diverse populations effectively while legitimizing their authority through familiar cultural frameworks. Archaeological evidence from Surk Kotal and other sites indicates that Cadphises established his initial power base in the mountainous regions north of the Hindu Kush, where defensible positions allowed him to control access routes between Bactria and the Tarim Basin. His forces utilized the superior mobility of nomadic cavalry units, while incorporating siege techniques learned from Greco-Bactrian military traditions, creating a hybrid warfare system particularly effective against both nomadic opponents and fortified settlements. The systematic nature of his tribal unification campaigns suggests sophisticated logistical planning, with coordinated attacks timed to exploit seasonal migration patterns and agricultural cycles that affected his opponent's defensive capabilities. The absorption of the Suomi tribe in the Western Territories provided Cadphises with access to established trade networks connecting Bactria with Parthian commercial centres. Rather than simply conquering Suomi settlements, Cadphises integrated their leadership into his expanding administrative structure, appointing former Suomi nobles as regional governors, while retaining ultimate authority over military and economic policy. This approach preserved valuable local knowledge about trade routes, seasonal patterns, and diplomatic relationships, while eliminating potential sources of organized resistance. The conquest of the Guishuang tribe required different tactics due to their control of fertile agricultural regions in central Bactria. Cadphises employed economic warfare alongside military pressure, disrupting irrigation systems and blocking access to seasonal pastures until Guishuang leadership agreed to submit to Kushan authority. The integration of Guishuang territories brought substantial agricultural resources under direct Kushan control, providing the economic foundation necessary to support larger military forces and more extensive territorial expansion beyond traditional UG boundaries. The Shrungmi and Dumi tribes, controlling southern approaches to the Hindu Kush passes, presented the greatest strategic challenge due to their proximity to emerging Kushan territories in Gandhara and their established relationships with local populations. Cadphises conducted a series of winter campaigns that exploited the tribe's vulnerability during months when mountain passes limited their mobility and access to alternative territories. The harsh conditions of these campaigns, fought at elevations exceeding 3,000 meters and temperatures well below freezing, demonstrated the exceptional endurance and tactical flexibility of Kushan military forces. The establishment of unified Kushan authority required the creation of administrative systems capable of governing diverse populations across vast territories with varying geographic, economic, and cultural characteristics. Cadphises adapted Greco-Bactrian bureaucratic practices, particularly their system of regional governors and tax collection mechanisms, while preserving nomadic traditions of tribal consultation and consensus building that maintained legitimacy among traditional UG populations. Provincial governors, selected from both Kushan tribal nobility and conquered tribal leadership, reported directly to the royal court while maintaining responsibility for local military recruitment, tax collection, and judicial administration. The integration of Hellenistic administrative practices with nomadic governance structures created distinctive institutional innovations that characterized Kushan imperial organization for centuries. Royal edicts were issued in multiple languages, including Greek, Bactrian, and various local dialects, ensuring effective communication across culturally diverse territories. The Kushan court adopted Greek secretarial practices for record-keeping and correspondence while maintaining traditional nomadic methods of oral communication and tribal assembly for important policy decisions affecting pastoral populations. Military expansion beyond the traditional UG territories began with systematic campaigns into the Kabul Valley around 50 AD, targeting the remnants of Indo-Greek kingdoms that had maintained precarious independence since the decline of Bactrian Greek power. The Kabul Valley's strategic importance stemmed from its position for controlling access routes between the Central Asian highlands and the Indian subcontinent, making it essential for any power seeking to establish commercial and political influence across the Hindu-Kush barrier. Kushan military forces entering the Kabul Valley encountered sophisticated defensive systems developed by Indo-Greek rulers, including fortified cities with multiple defensive walls, advanced siege equipment, and professional military units trained in Hellenistic tactical methods. The Siege of Kapisa, the principal Indo-Greek stronghold in the valley, required Kushan forces to adapt their traditional cavalry-based tactics to overcome stone fortifications and urban defensive positions. Archaeological evidence from the site reveals the systematic destruction of defensive walls through undermining techniques, suggesting that Kushan engineers had acquired advanced siege warfare knowledge from their Greco-Bactrian subjects. The conquest of Gandhara represented the most significant territorial expansion under Kujula Kadphises, bringing Kushan authority into direct contact with established Indian political systems and Buddhist religious institutions. Gandharan cities like Pushkalavati and Chasada possess sophisticated urban infrastructure, including paved streets, drainage systems, and public buildings that required different administrative approaches than the pastoral territories of Bactria. The region's prosperity, based on agriculture, craft production, and trans-regional trade, provided substantial tax revenues that funded further military expansion and administrative development. Kushan military organization in Gandhara incorporated local recruitment practices alongside traditional nomadic cavalry units, creating composite forces capable of operating effectively in the diverse terrain of the Indian subcontinent. Local infantry units, trained in formation fighting and equipped with iron weapons, produced in Gandharan workshops, supplemented nomadic horsemen in siege operations and urban warfare. This military synthesis reflected broader patterns of cultural adaptation that characterized Kushan imperial expansion, combining nomadic mobility with sedentary military technologies. The development of Kushan administrative systems reflected the practical challenges of governing territories with fundamentally different economic, social, and cultural characteristics. In pastoral regions of Bactria, traditional nomadic leadership structures remained largely intact, with tribal chiefs maintaining authority over seasonal migrations, livestock management, and local dispute resolution, while acknowledging Kushan royal authority for external relations and military service. Urban centres in Gandhara and the Kabul Valley required more complex administrative arrangements, including appointed governors, professional bureaucrats, and specialised officials responsible for tax collection, trade regulation, and public works maintenance. Numismatic evidence provides detailed insight into the evolution of Kushan royal ideology and the gradual development of imperial legitimacy concepts that synthesize diverse cultural traditions. Early coins issued under Kujula Kadphises display clear Greek influences in their design, featuring royal portraits executed in Hellenistic style, alongside Greek inscriptions identifying the ruler as King of Kings. The adoption of this Persian-derived title, combined with Greek artistic conventions, demonstrates the cosmopolitan nature of early Kushan political culture and their conscious effort to appeal to diverse subject populations. The iconographic program of Kushan coinage evolved systematically throughout Kadphises' reign, incorporating traditional nomadic symbols alongside Hellenistic and Iranian royal imagery. Horse and rider motifs, fundamental elements of nomadic artistic tradition, appeared on coin reverses while royal portraits maintained Greek stylistic conventions. Fire altars, borrowed from Iranian religious traditions, began appearing on later issues, indicating the growing influence of Zoroastrian practices within Kushan royal ideology. Bronze coins produced for local circulation in Gandharan territories featured distinctly different iconographic programs than gold and silver issues intended for international trade and royal ceremonial purposes. Local bronze issues incorporated Buddhist symbols, including stupas and dharma wheels, alongside royal portraits, demonstrating Kushan recognition of Buddhism's importance among Gandharan populations. This numismatic differentiation revealed sophisticated understanding of the diverse religious and cultural preferences within Kushan territories and the practical necessity of appealing to different constituencies through appropriate symbolic representation. The technical quality of Kushan coinage under Cadphises indicates the rapid development of sophisticated minting operations that combined Greek technological expertise with local metalworking traditions. Gold coins achieved exceptional purity levels, often exceeding 90% gold content, while maintaining consistent weight standards that facilitated their acceptance in international trade networks, extending from the Roman Empire to Han China. The establishment of multiple mints across Kushan territories, including facilities in Bactria, the Kabul Valley, and Gandhara, required substantial investment in equipment, skilled personnel, and quality control systems. The territorial expansion under Kujula Cadphises extended Kushan authority into northwestern regions of the Indian subcontinent, including parts of modern Punjab and the upper Indus Valley. These conquests brought Kushan forces into contact with established Indian political systems, including remnant Indo-Scythian kingdoms and emerging regional powers that controlled important commercial centres and agricultural territories. The integration of these diverse territories required flexible administrative approaches that accommodated local legal systems, religious practices, and economic structures while maintaining Kushan political authority. Archaeological evidence from sites like Taxila reveals the gradual transformation of existing urban infrastructure under Kushan rule, with new construction projects reflecting the synthesis of architectural traditions that characterize their imperial style. Defensive walls are reinforced using nomadic military engineering techniques, while public buildings incorporated decorative elements from Greek, Iranian, and Indian artistic traditions. The systematic nature of these modifications suggests centralized planning and substantial resource investment that demonstrated Kushan commitment to permanent territorial control rather than temporary occupation. The establishment of permanent Kushan administrative centers in conquered territories required the development of complex supply systems capable of supporting royal courts, military garrisons, and bureaucratic personnel across vast distances and challenging terrain. Archaeological remains of storage facilities, workshops, and transportation infrastructure indicate sophisticated logistical planning that enabled effective governance of territories separated by mountain ranges and desert regions. The construction of roads, bridges, and caravanserais facilitated communication and trade, while demonstrating Kushan engineering capabilities that combined nomadic knowledge of terrain with sedentary construction techniques. The death of Kujula Cadphises around 80 AD marked a critical transition period for the nascent Kushan Empire, as succession disputes and external pressures threatened to fragment the territorial gains achieved through decades of systematic expansion. Vima Takto, whose relationship to the deceased ruler remains debated among historians, emerged from this succession crisis through a combination of military prowess and strategic alliances that consolidated his authority over the diverse Kushan territories. Archaeological evidence from Rabatak suggests that Takto may have initially ruled as co-regent alongside other potential successors before establishing sole authority through the systematic elimination of rival claimants to the throne. The consolidation of power under Vima Takto required immediate attention to the strategic vulnerability of Kushan territories along the Hindu Kush mountain range. where inadequate control over critical passes had allowed hostile forces to threaten the empire's heartland in Bactria. The Khyber Pass, serving as the primary corridor between Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent, remained partially controlled by independent tribal groups who extracted tribute from merchant caravans while maintaining nominal independence from both Kushan and Parthian authority. These tribal confederations, primarily composed of descendants of earlier Sakka migrations, possessed intimate knowledge of mountain terrain and seasonal weather patterns that made them formidable opponents despite their limited resources. Takto's military campaigns in the Hindu Kush region employed innovative tactical approaches that combined traditional nomadic cavalry mobility with siege techniques adapted specifically for mountain warfare. His forces constructed portable siege equipment designed for transport across narrow mountain paths, including disassembled catapults and scaling ladders that could be rapidly assembled at strategic locations. The systematic nature of these operations indicates sophisticated logistical planning, with supply depots established at regular intervals along major routes to support extended campaigns in terrain where local resources were insufficient to sustain large military forces. The conquest of the Khyber Pass required a multi-year campaign that exploited seasonal vulnerabilities in tribal defensive positions, while gradually establishing permanent Kushan military installations at key geographic choke points. During winter months, when heavy snowfall restricted movement and communication between tribal settlements, Kushan forces conducted systematic raids that captured livestock, destroyed food stores, and eliminated isolated defensive positions. These operations, conducted at altitudes where temperatures regularly dropped below freezing, demonstrated exceptional endurance and tactical discipline among Kushan military units. The establishment of Kushan control over the Khyber Pass transformed the economic dynamics of trans-regional trade networks that connected the Roman Empire, Parthian territories, Central Asian city-states, and Chinese commercial centres. Merchant caravans carrying silk, spices, precious stones, and luxury manufactured goods could now travel under unified protection from Bactria to Gandhara, eliminating the multiple tribute payments and security arrangements previously required when crossing territories controlled by independent tribal groups. The standardization of customs procedures and security protocols reduced transaction costs while increasing the volume and reliability of commercial traffic. Archaeological excavations at Begram, located strategically along the route between Bactria and the Kabul Valley, reveal dramatic increases in construction activity and commercial infrastructure during Vima Takto's reign. New warehouse facilities, designed specifically for the storage and transshipment of luxury goods, incorporated advanced ventilation systems and security features that protected valuable merchandise from both environmental damage and theft. The discovery of Roman glassware, Chinese lacquerware, and Indian ivory carvings in these contexts demonstrates the truly international character of trade networks operating under Kushan protection. The integration of local Gandharan populations into Kushan administrative structures required sophisticated diplomatic strategies that balanced imperial authority with respect for established local traditions and power relationships. Takto implemented a systematic policy of intermarriage between Kushan nobility and prominent Gandharan families, creating kinship networks that bound local elites to imperial interests, while providing them with enhanced status and economic opportunities. These matrimonial alliances were carefully negotiated to preserve local religious practices and cultural customs, while ensuring political loyalty to the Kushan throne. The appointment of local administrators to positions within the imperial bureaucracy represented a significant departure from earlier nomadic governance practices, which had typically relied on tribal kinship networks for political organisation. Gandharan nobles with demonstrated administrative experience were appointed as regional governors, tax collectors, and judicial officials, while Kushan oversight mechanisms ensured imperial policy implementation and prevented the development of autonomous power bases. This administrative synthesis created hybrid governance structures that combined nomadic flexibility with sedentary, bureaucratic efficiency. Archaeological evidence from Taxila provides detailed insight into the cultural and economic transformation occurring within Gandharan urban centres during Takto's reign. Excavations in the Sirkap area reveal extensive construction projects that expanded residential districts, commercial facilities, and religious buildings to accommodate growing populations and increased economic activity. The architectural styles employed in these projects demonstrate sophisticated synthesis of Hellenistic, Iranian, and Indian design elements, creating distinctive Kushan imperial architecture that reflected the cosmopolitan nature of their territorial empire. The prosperity evident in Taxila's archaeological record extended beyond mere construction activity to encompass fundamental changes in craft production, commercial organisation, and cultural expression. Workshops producing luxury goods for both local consumption and export trade expanded their operations significantly, with archaeological evidence indicating increased production of carved ivory objects, decorated metalware, and sophisticated textiles. The technical quality of these products improved markedly during this period, suggesting both increased investment in skilled craftsmanship and access to higher quality raw materials through expanded trade networks. The discovery of hoards containing coins from multiple contemporary empires at sites throughout Gandhara demonstrates the region's central role in international commercial networks during Takto's reign. Roman aurae, Parthian drachms, and Chinese bronze coins appear alongside Kushan gold and silver issues, indicating the active participation of Gandharan merchants in trade relationships extending across the known world. The presence of sophisticated weighing equipment and testing devices for precious metals suggests that local commercial centres had developed standardized procedures for evaluating and exchanging diverse monetary systems. The integration of Indo-Scythian populations presented particular challenges due to their established political structures and military capabilities, which had enabled them to maintain independent kingdoms in parts of northwestern India, despite pressure from various imperial powers. Vima Takto's approach to these populations emphasized diplomatic negotiation backed by credible military threats, offering Indo-Scythian rulers the choice between incorporation into the Kushan Empire as subordinate allies or complete military conquest and territorial absorption. The successful integration of Indo-Scythian territories required careful attention to existing legal systems and administrative practices that had evolved to govern diverse populations, with varying cultural backgrounds and economic interests. Kushan administrators studied Indo-Scythian legal codes and judicial procedures, adapting elements that proved effective while introducing imperial standards for taxation, military service, and commercial regulation. This selective adoption of local practices created legal pluralism within Kushan territories, where different populations might be governed by modified versions of their traditional laws while acknowledging overall imperial authority. Military reforms implemented during Takto's reign reflected lessons learned from campaigns in diverse terrain and against opponents employing different tactical systems. The traditional Kushan reliance on heavy cavalry was supplemented by specialized infantry units, trained for mountain warfare, siege operations, and urban combat situations that nomadic horsemen found challenging. These infantry formations incorporated recruitment from local populations alongside traditional Kushan warriors, creating composite military units that combined nomadic mobility with specialized tactical capabilities. The development of standardized military equipment and training procedures enabled Kushan forces to operate effectively across the empire's diverse geographic regions while maintaining tactical coherence and operational efficiency. Archaeological discoveries of weapons and armour from this period reveal sophisticated metallurgical techniques and standardized production methods that ensured consistent quality and interchangeable components. The establishment of armories and weapons workshops in major administrative centres provided maintenance and replacement capabilities that supported extended military operations far from traditional Kushan heartlands. The expansion of Kushan territorial control during Taktou's reign required substantial investment in communication infrastructure that enabled effective coordination of administrative and military activities across vast distances and challenging terrain. The construction of roads suitable for wheeled vehicles, rather than merely pack animals, facilitated the movement of heavy equipment, bulk supplies, and administrative personnel between major centres. These roads incorporated engineering solutions adapted to specific geographic challenges, including bridges designed to withstand seasonal flooding and mountain passes engineered to remain accessible during adverse weather conditions. The establishment of relay stations and administrative posts along major routes created a communication network that enabled rapid transmission of information and coordination of policy implementation across the empire. These facilities provided not only communication services, but also accommodation and supply support for official travellers, merchants, and military units moving through imperial territories. The systematic spacing and standardized construction of these installations indicates centralized planning and substantial resource investment that demonstrated Kushan commitment to effective territorial administration. Archaeological evidence from urban centres throughout the expanded Kushan territories reveals remarkable consistency in administrative architecture and urban planning principles that reflected imperial standards, while accommodating local geographic and cultural conditions. Government buildings, military installations, and public facilities constructed during this period employed standardized design elements and construction techniques that created visual symbols of imperial authority while providing functional spaces for administrative activities. The quality of construction materials and architectural decoration in these buildings demonstrated imperial wealth and technological capabilities to both subject populations and foreign visitors. The succession of Vima Kadphises to the Kushan throne around 105 AD marked the beginning of the most economically transformative period in the empire's history, as his reign witnessed the systematic implementation of monetary reforms and commercial policies that established the Kushans as the dominant economic power, controlling trade between the Roman Empire, Parthian territories, Han China, and the Indian subcontinent. Unlike his predecessors who had focused primarily on territorial expansion and political consolidation, Kadphises recognized that sustained imperial power required sophisticated economic foundations capable of generating the revenues necessary to maintain military forces, administrative systems, and infrastructure projects across the empire's vast territories. The introduction of standardized gold coinage under Vima Kadphises represented a revolutionary departure from the diverse monetary systems that had previously characterized trade relationships across Central Asia and northern India. Prior to his reforms, commercial transactions involving long-distance trade required merchants to navigate complex exchange rates between Roman aurei, Parthian drachms, Indo-Scythian silver coins, and Chinese bronze issues, each with different weight standards, purity levels, and regional acceptance patterns. This monetary fragmentation created substantial transaction costs and uncertainties that limited the volume and efficiency of commercial activities while providing opportunities for currency manipulation and fraud. Kadphises established royal mints in Bactria, Kapisa, Mathura, and Purushapura, each equipped with standardized die-cutting equipment and staffed by skilled craftsmen trained in uniform production techniques that ensured consistent weight, purity, and artistic quality across all imperial territories. The gold content of Kushan dinars was fixed at approximately 96% purity, significantly higher than most contemporary coinages, while the weight standard of 8.2 grams provided a convenient ratio for exchange calculations with existing monetary systems. The exceptional purity and consistent weight of these coins quickly established them as preferred media of exchange throughout the trade networks connecting the Mediterranean world with East Asia. The iconographic program of the new coinage reflected Cadphises' sophisticated understanding of the diverse religious and cultural preferences within his empire, while projecting unified imperial authority. Gold dinars featured the king's portrait on the obverse, executed in a distinctive artistic style that combined Hellenistic portraiture techniques with Iranian royal symbolism and nomadic artistic elements. The reverse sides displayed carefully selected deities from the Kushan religious pantheon, including Greek gods like Heracles and Helios, Iranian divinities such as Mithra and Ardoksho, and Indian figures including Shiva and the Buddha, demonstrating imperial recognition of religious diversity while maintaining political unity. The technical sophistication of Kushan minting operations required substantial investment in equipment, skilled personnel, and quality control systems that rival the monetary production capabilities of contemporary major powers. Archaeological evidence from mint sites reveals the use of precision balance scales capable of detecting weight variations as small as 0.1 grams, sophisticated furnaces for gold purification that achieve temperatures exceeding 1,200 degrees Celsius, and die-cutting tools that produced artistic details rivaling the finest examples of Roman or Greek numismatic art. The establishment of these minting facilities represented one of the largest industrial investments undertaken by any Central Asian power during this period. The standardization of Kushan coinage facilitated the development of systematic trade monopolies over luxury goods that form the backbone of trans-Asian commercial networks. Silk production in Han Chinese territories, spice cultivation in South Indian kingdoms, and precious stone mining in Central Asian regions had traditionally been controlled by local rulers who extracted maximum profits through restrictive trade policies and high taxation. Cadphises implemented a coordinated strategy that combined diplomatic negotiations, economic incentives, and military pressure to establish Kushan control over critical segments of these supply chains. The silk trade monopoly developed through a series of agreements with Chinese merchants and officials that granted Kushan traders preferential access to raw silk production centres in exchange for guaranteed supplies of Central Asian horses, precious metals, and luxury manufactured goods. Archaeological evidence from sites along the Silk Road indicates the establishment of permanent Kushan trading posts in Kashgar, Yarkand, and other Tarim Basin cities, where imperial representatives negotiated purchase contracts, arranged transportation logistics, and provided security services for merchant caravans carrying silk westward toward Mediterranean markets. The complexity of silk trade operations required sophisticated financial instruments and commercial practices that went far beyond simple barter exchanges or immediate cash transactions. Kushan merchants developed credit systems that allowed Chinese silk producers to receive advance payments for future deliveries, while insurance arrangements protected against losses from banditry, natural disasters, or political disruptions along the lengthy trade routes. These financial innovations, documented in commercial contracts discovered at sites like Nia and Lulan, demonstrate the advanced level of economic organization achieved under Cadphises' commercial policies. Spice trade monopolies focused on the procurement and distribution of high-value aromatics, medicinal plants, and culinary seasonings that commanded premium prices in Roman and Persian markets. Cinnamon from Ceylon, pepper from the Malabar coast, cardamom from the Western Ghats, and saffron from Kashmir were consolidated through Kushan commercial networks that eliminated intermediate traders while providing producers with guaranteed markets and stable prices. The standardization of weights, measures, and quality grades for different spice varieties enabled efficient bulk purchasing and reduced the risks associated with variable product quality that had previously plagued international spice commerce. The precious stone trade encompassed the systematic exploitation of gemstone deposits throughout the Hindu Kush Pamir, and Karakoram mountain ranges, where lapis lazuli, rubies, emeralds, and various semi-precious stones were extracted through mining operations that combined traditional techniques with technological innovations adapted from Chinese and Roman engineering practices. Kushan control over these mining regions enabled the empire to regulate global supplies of luxury gemstones while maintaining artificially high prices through careful production management and strategic stockpiling of premium quality stones. Archaeological excavations at Begram have revealed extraordinary evidence of the wealth and diversity of luxury goods flowing through Kushan commercial networks during Kadphisa's reign. The discovery of sealed chambers containing Roman bronzes, Chinese lacquerware, Indian ivory carvings, and Alexandrian glassware demonstrates the truly international character of trade relationships coordinated by Kushan merchants. The careful preservation of these goods in climate-controlled storage facilities indicates sophisticated understanding of conservation techniques necessary to maintain product quality during extended transportation and storage periods. The transformation of urban centres into specialised commercial hubs required substantial infrastructure investments and administrative reorganisation that reflected the economic priorities of Kadphisa's reign. Mathura, strategically located along the Yamuna River trade route connecting the Gangetic Plain with northwestern regions, underwent massive expansion that included the construction of new warehouse districts, expanded port facilities, and specialised markets for different categories of luxury goods. Archaeological evidence reveals the systematic planning of commercial districts, with separate areas designated for silk processing, spice storage, metalworking, and gem cutting that maximised operational efficiency, while maintaining security for valuable merchandise. The urban planning of Mathura during this period incorporated advanced engineering solutions for the logistical challenges of handling large volumes of diverse trade goods. Warehouse complexes featured sophisticated ventilation systems that prevented moisture damage to textiles and organic materials, while underground storage chambers provided secure environments for precious metals and gemstones. The construction of standardized loading docks along the riverfront facilitated efficient transfer of goods between river barges and overland caravans, reducing handling costs and minimizing opportunities for theft or damage. Purushapura, serving as the primary administrative center for Kushan territories in Gandhara, developed into a major commercial hub specializing in the processing and distribution of goods, moving between Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. The city's strategic location near the eastern terminus of the Khyber Pass made it an essential transshipment point for caravans travelling between Bactria and Indian commercial centres. Archaeological remains reveal extensive workshop districts where raw materials were processed into finished luxury goods, including silk weaving facilities that produced high-quality textiles for export to Roman markets and metalworking centres that created decorative objects combining Hellenistic, Iranian, and Indian artistic traditions. The commercial infrastructure of Purushapura included innovative solutions for the storage and security challenges posed by the city's role as a major transshipment centre. Multi-storey warehouse buildings incorporated fire-resistant construction techniques using stone foundations and brick walls that protected valuable merchandise from both accidental fires and deliberate arson attacks. The systematic organisation of storage facilities according to product categories and security requirements enabled efficient inventory management while minimising the risks associated with concentrating large quantities of valuable goods in urban environments. Kapisa emerged as the primary commercial centre for trade relationships with northern regions, including the Tarim Basin cities and Chinese commercial networks. The city's location in the Kabul Valley provided access to mountain passes leading towards Central Asian trade routes, while maintaining connections with Gandharan commercial centres. Archaeological evidence indicates substantial investment in transportation infrastructure, including the construction of improved roads capable of handling heavy-wheeled vehicles and the establishment of relay stations that provided maintenance and supply services for merchant caravans travelling between Kapisa and distant markets. The development of Kapisa as a commercial hub required sophisticated solutions for the seasonal challenges posed by mountain trade routes that became impassable during winter months. The construction of massive storage complexes enabled merchants to accumulate goods during the trading season for distribution when routes reopened, while financial institutions provided credit services that allowed commercial operations to continue despite seasonal interruptions in transportation. These economic innovations enabled year-round commercial activity despite geographic constraints that had previously limited trade relationships with northern regions. The religious patronage policies implemented by Vima Kadphises reflected his recognition that economic prosperity depended on social stability and cultural cohesion across the empire's diverse populations. Rather than imposing uniform religious practices, his administration supported multiple religious traditions simultaneously, providing financial support for Buddhist monasteries, Zoroastrian fire temples, Greek sanctuaries, and traditional Central Asian ritual sites. This inclusive approach maintained social harmony while demonstrating imperial wealth and benevolence to different constituency groups. Buddhist institutions received particular attention due to their important role in maintaining commercial networks and providing services essential to long-distance trade operations. Monasteries along major trade routes served as secure resting places for merchant caravans, while Buddhist monks provided literacy services, legal mediation, and financial advice that facilitated commercial transactions. The construction of new stupas and the expansion of existing monastic complexes during Kadphises' reign created visible symbols of imperial support for Buddhism, while providing practical infrastructure that supported commercial activities. The patronage of traditional Central Asian religious practices maintained connections with the empire's nomadic heritage, while ensuring the loyalty of tribal populations who provided essential military services and controlled strategic territories along frontier regions. Archaeological evidence from sites like Surt Kotal reveals the construction of fire temples and ritual platforms that combined Zoroastrian architectural elements with traditional nomadic ceremonial features, creating distinctive religious complexes that serve both spiritual and political functions. The integration of diverse religious traditions within imperial patronage policies required sophisticated diplomatic skills and substantial financial resources that demonstrated the economic success of Kadphises' commercial reforms. The construction and maintenance of religious facilities for multiple traditions represented one of the largest categories of imperial expenditure, requiring specialized craftsmen, imported materials, and ongoing operational support that employed thousands of workers while creating visible demonstrations of imperial prosperity and cultural sophistication. The death of Vima Kadphises around 127 AD precipitated a succession crisis that threatened to fragment the economic and territorial achievements of the previous 2 decades, as multiple claimants emerged from within the royal family while provincial governors contemplated declarations of independence that could have shattered the unified commercial networks essential to Kushan prosperity. From this political uncertainty emerged Kanishka, whose exact relationship to his predecessor remains debated among scholars, but whose consolidation of imperial authority marked the beginning of the most culturally and economically dynamic period in Kushan history. Archaeological evidence from Mathurus suggests that Kanishka may have initially controlled only the southern territories of the empire, requiring systematic military campaigns to reassert Kushan authority over rebellious provinces in Bactria and Gandhara. The military campaigns that established Kanishka's authority over the entire Kushan Empire demonstrated sophisticated strategic planning and logistical capabilities that surpassed the organizational achievements of his predecessors. His forces employed coordinated attacks across multiple theatres simultaneously, preventing potential rivals from consolidating their resources or forming effective alliances against royal authority. The siege of Kapisa held by a rival claimant with substantial Bactrian support, required Kanishka's engineers to develop innovative assault techniques for mountain warfare, including the construction of siege towers designed for transport across narrow valley approaches and the use of diverted watercourses to undermine defensive walls built on rocky foundations. The consolidation of imperial authority enabled Kanishka to implement territorial expansion policies that extended Kushan control deeper into the Indian subcontinent than any previous Central Asian power had achieved. His armies advanced along the Yamuna River Valley, capturing Mathura and establishing permanent military installations that controlled access routes between the Gangetic Plain and northwestern regions. The conquest of Mathura required sophisticated siege operations against heavily fortified urban centres, defended by professional military units equipped with advanced metallurgical weapons and trained in formation fighting techniques adapted from both Greek and Indian military traditions. Archaeological evidence from Mathura reveals the systematic destruction of existing fortifications, followed by the construction of new defensive works designed according to Kushan military engineering principles. The new fortifications incorporated lessons learned from mountain warfare in Central Asia, featuring multiple defensive lines with overlapping fields of fire and underground passages that enabled defenders to maintain communication and supply lines during extended sieges. The technical sophistication of these defensive works required skilled engineers and substantial resource investments that demonstrated Kanishka's commitment to permanent territorial control rather than temporary occupation for tribute collection. The expansion into the Gangetic Plain brought Kushan forces into direct confrontation with established Indian kingdoms that possessed sophisticated military organizations, extensive financial resources, and diplomatic relationships with other regional powers capable of providing military assistance. The Kingdom of Magadha, controlling strategic territories along the Ganges River, maintained professional armies equipped with war elephants, iron weapons produced in advanced metallurgical centres, and siege equipment adapted from both indigenous Indian innovations and techniques learned through contact with Hellenistic military traditions. Kushan military adaptation to Indian warfare conditions required significant modifications to traditional nomadic cavalry tactics, as the terrain of the Gangetic Plain favoured infantry formations and elephant units over the mounted archery techniques that had proven effective in Central Asian campaigns. Kanishka's forces incorporated captured war elephants into their tactical formations, while developing specialized anti-elephant weapons and techniques that neutralized the advantages these animals provided to Indian armies. The training of Kushan cavalry units to operate effectively alongside elephant formations required extensive practice and coordination that demonstrated the adaptability of nomadic military traditions to diverse combat environments. The conquest of Pataliputra, the ancient capital of Magadha, represented the culmination of Kanishka's expansion into the Indian subcontinent and established Kushan authority over territories that had been the heartland of major Indian empires for centuries. The siege operations required to capture this heavily fortified city lasted several months and involved the construction of extensive siege works that diverted river water to flood defensive positions while providing assault forces with protected approaches to the city walls. The technical complexity of these operations indicates that Kushan military engineers had achieved mastery of advanced siege techniques comparable to those employed by contemporary Roman or Chinese armies. The northern expansion of Kushan territories under Kanishka extended imperial control into the Tarim Basin cities that served as essential links in the Silk Road trade networks connecting China with western regions. The conquest of Kashgar, Yarkand and Khotan required different tactical approaches than the Indian campaigns, as these cities were defended by forces trained in Chinese military techniques and equipped with crossbows, armour and siege equipment that reflected the technological innovations of Han Dynasty military engineering. The arid terrain and extreme temperature variations of the Tarim Basin presented logistical challenges that required Kushan forces to develop new supply systems and tactical adaptations for desert warfare. The integration of Tarim Basin territories into the Kushan Empire provided direct control over the eastern terminus of Central Asian trade routes, while establishing diplomatic relationships with Chinese commercial and military officials that enhanced the empire's international standing. Archaeological evidence from sites like Nia and Meran reveals the establishment of permanent Kushan administrative centres, equipped with facilities for customs collection, commercial arbitration, and military supply that enabled effective governance of these remote territories. The construction of fortified compounds with standardized architectural features throughout the Tarim Basin demonstrated imperial commitment to maintaining permanent control over these strategically and economically vital regions. The western expansion under Kanishka brought Kushan forces into conflict with Parthian territories along the Amu Darya river system, where competing claims to control over trade routes and tribute relationships with local populations had created tensions that periodically erupted into military confrontations. The Parthian Empire, struggling with internal succession disputes and pressure from Roman forces along its western frontiers, could not devote sufficient military resources to effectively contest Kushan expansion into traditionally Parthian spheres of influence. Kanishka exploited these Parthian weaknesses through systematic campaigns that captured key fortified positions while avoiding major battles that might have prompted coordinated Parthian counterattacks. The conquest of territories in modern Afghanistan and eastern Iran provided Kushan control over additional segments of the trans-Asian trade networks, while creating buffer zones that protected the empire's heartland from potential Parthian invasions. The integration of these territories required careful attention to existing administrative systems and local power relationships, as the populations included diverse ethnic groups with established political traditions and economic interests that needed accommodation within imperial governance structures. Kanishka's administrators adapted successful integration techniques developed during earlier conquests, offering local elites positions within the imperial hierarchy while maintaining ultimate authority over military and fiscal policy. The Fourth Buddhist Council, convened under Kanishka's patronage around 140 AD, represented one of the most significant religious developments in ancient Asian history, as the assembled monks and scholars systematized Mahayana Buddhist doctrines that would influence religious thought across Asia for centuries. The council sessions, held in Kashmir at a specially constructed monastery complex, brought together Buddhist scholars from throughout the Kushan Empire and beyond, including representatives from Ceylon, Burma, and Chinese Buddhist communities. The linguistic diversity of the participants required the development of translation protocols and standardized terminology that enabled effective communication between scholars trained in different textual traditions and philosophical schools. The doctrinal innovations emerging from the Fourth Buddhist Council reflected the cosmopolitan character of Kushan Buddhist communities and the influence of diverse philosophical traditions that had developed through centuries of cultural exchange along trade routes. The systematization of Mahayana concepts, particularly the Bodhisattva ideal and the doctrine of emptiness, incorporated elements from Greek philosophical traditions, Iranian religious concepts, and indigenous Indian spiritual practices that created distinctive theological syntheses. These doctrinal developments were recorded in Sanskrit texts that established standardized formulations for complex philosophical concepts while maintaining accessibility for diverse audiences with varying levels of scholarly training. The architectural projects undertaken to support the Fourth Buddhist Council included the construction of monastery complexes designed to accommodate hundreds of scholars and their support staff, while providing facilities for manuscript copying, philosophical debates, and ceremonial activities. The monastery buildings incorporated architectural innovations that combined traditional Indian Buddhist design elements with Central Asian construction techniques and decorative motifs that reflected the international character of the assembled community. The technical sophistication of these buildings, including advanced heating systems for the harsh Kashmir climate and specialized libraries for manuscript storage, demonstrated the substantial resources that Kanishka devoted to supporting Buddhist scholarship. The manuscript copying projects initiated during the council sessions produced standardized versions of essential Buddhist texts that were distributed to monasteries throughout the Kushan Empire and beyond, creating unprecedented uniformity in doctrinal understanding across geographically dispersed Buddhist communities. The copying operations required the training of specialized scribes in standardized Sanskrit writing systems, while developing quality control procedures that ensured accuracy in the reproduction of complex philosophical texts. The scale of these copying projects, involving hundreds of scribes working simultaneously on multiple text versions, represented one of the largest scholarly undertakings in ancient Asian history. The architectural achievements of Kanishka's reign extended far beyond religious buildings to encompass massive urban development projects that transformed major cities into showcase centres, demonstrating imperial wealth and technological capabilities. The Great Stupa at Purushapura, rising to a height exceeding 120 metres according to Chinese pilgrim accounts, represented the largest Buddhist monument constructed during the ancient period and required engineering solutions that pushed contemporary construction techniques to their limits. The foundation work alone involved the excavation and preparation of a circular base, measuring over 90 metres in diameter, with stone foundations extending deep into the bedrock to support the enormous weight of the superstructure. The construction techniques employed in the Great Stupa incorporated innovations adapted from diverse architectural traditions, including Roman concrete technology, Chinese timber framing systems, and traditional Indian stone carving methods that created structural solutions capable of withstanding seismic activity common in the region. The decorative program of the stupa featured sculptural elements executed in the distinctive Gandharan style that synthesized Hellenistic artistic techniques with Buddhist iconographic requirements, creating narrative reliefs that depicted scenes from Buddhist literature with unprecedented artistic sophistication and emotional expression. The development of Gandharan sculptural styles under Kanishka's patronage represented one of the most significant artistic achievements of the ancient world, as local craftsmen synthesized Greek sculptural techniques with Buddhist religious requirements to create distinctive artistic traditions that influenced religious art across Asia. The workshops of Taxila and Peshawar produced Buddha images, bodhisattva sculptures, and narrative reliefs that combined the anatomical accuracy and emotional expression of Hellenistic art with the symbolic requirements and spiritual content of Buddhist iconography. The technical mastery evident in these sculptures required specialized training programs that transmitted Greek artistic techniques to local craftsmen while adapting these methods to Buddhist artistic requirements. The iconographic innovations of Gandharan Buddhist art included the development of standardized visual representations for Buddhist concepts that had previously been depicted only through symbolic elements, enabling more direct communication of complex philosophical ideas through visual media. The creation of anthropomorphic Buddha images, following Greek sculptural conventions for idealized human forms, provided focal points for devotional practices while maintaining the spiritual dignity required for religious contexts. These artistic innovations spread throughout Buddhist communities across Asia, establishing visual traditions that continue to influence religious art for centuries. The diplomatic relationships established during Kanishka's reign extended Kushan international influence across the known world, with archaeological and textual evidence documenting official exchanges with the Roman Empire, Han China, Parthian territories, and various Indian kingdoms. Chinese historical records, particularly the Hu Hanshu compiled during the later Han period, provide detailed accounts of Kushan diplomatic missions to the Chinese court that included presentations of exotic gifts, requests for military cooperation against common enemies, and negotiations for commercial agreements that regulated trade relationships along the Silk Road networks. The diplomatic exchanges with Han China involved complex negotiations regarding territorial boundaries in Central Asia, where competing Chinese and Kushan claims to authority over Tarim Basin cities required careful diplomatic resolution to prevent military conflicts that could have disrupted profitable trade relationships. The Chinese records describe Kushan diplomatic presentations that included trained elephants, precious gemstones, and luxury textiles that demonstrated imperial wealth while providing Chinese officials with tangible evidence of Kushan power and sophistication. These diplomatic exchanges established precedents for international relations that influenced Central Asian political developments for centuries. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout the Roman Empire, including Pompeii and various Mediterranean commercial centres, reveals the presence of goods that can be traced to Kushan territories through distinctive artistic styles, manufacturing techniques, and material compositions that indicate direct trade relationships rather than indirect exchange through intermediate merchants. Roman glassware, bronze objects, and coins discovered in Kushan archaeological contexts demonstrate reciprocal trade relationships that brought Mediterranean luxury goods to Central Asian markets while providing Roman consumers with access to Asian silk, spices, and precious stones processed through Kushan commercial networks. The diplomatic relationships established during Kanishka's reign created unprecedented opportunities for cultural exchange that fundamentally transformed artistic expression, religious practice, and intellectual development throughout Kushan territories. The convergence of Greek sculptural traditions, Persian architectural principles, Indian philosophical systems, and Central Asian decorative motifs produced distinctive artistic syntheses that reflected the cosmopolitan character of Kushan imperial society, while establishing new aesthetic standards that influenced cultural development across Asia for centuries. The emergence of Gandharan art as a unique fusion of diverse aesthetic traditions began with the systematic training of local craftsmen in techniques derived from multiple cultural sources, creating workshops capable of producing sculptures, architectural decorations, and luxury objects that satisfied the diverse aesthetic preferences of Kushan imperial patrons. Archaeological excavations at Taxila have revealed workshop complexes where Greek sculptural techniques were taught alongside traditional Indian stone carving methods, while Persian decorative motifs were integrated with Central Asian animal-style elements to create distinctive artistic vocabularies that express Kushan imperial ideology through visual media. The technical mastery evident in Gandharan sculptural workshops required sophisticated training programs that transmitted complex artistic skills across cultural boundaries while adapting established techniques to new religious and political requirements. Master craftsmen from Greek communities in Bactria worked alongside Indian sculptors trained in traditional Buddhist artistic conventions, creating collaborative learning environments where different technical approaches were synthesized into innovative artistic methods. The stone carving techniques developed in these workshops combine the anatomical precision of Greek sculpture with the symbolic requirements of Buddhist iconography, producing Buddha images that maintained spiritual dignity while achieving unprecedented levels of artistic sophistication. The standardization of Buddha imagery during this period represented one of the most significant developments in Asian religious art, as Gandharan sculptors created anthropomorphic representations that established visual conventions for depicting Buddhist concepts that had previously been represented only through symbolic elements. The development of standardized physical characteristics for Buddha images, including the distinctive hair arrangement, elongated earlobes, and specific hand gestures, required careful negotiation between Greek artistic traditions, emphasizing naturalistic human representation, and Buddhist theological requirements for depicting spiritual transcendence through physical form. The iconographic innovations of Gandharan Buddhist art extended beyond simple Buddha images to encompass comprehensive visual programs that depicted complex philosophical concepts through narrative sculptural sequences. Relief panels carved for monastery decorations illustrated scenes from Buddhist literature with unprecedented detail and emotional expression, combining Greek dramatic techniques with Indian storytelling traditions to create visual narratives that communicated sophisticated theological concepts to diverse audiences with varying levels of literacy and philosophical training. These narrative reliefs incorporated landscape elements, architectural backgrounds, and crowd scenes that demonstrated the influence of Hellenistic artistic traditions while maintaining Buddhist spiritual content. The development of bodhisattva imagery in Gandharan art reflected the theological innovations emerging from Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, while demonstrating the influence of diverse cultural traditions on religious artistic expression. Bodhisattva sculptures combined the idealized physical beauty of Greek divine imagery with the compassionate spiritual qualities emphasized in Mahayana doctrine, creating visual representations that appealed to both aesthetic sensibilities and religious devotion. The elaborate jewelry, flowing garments, and graceful poses of these sculptures reflected Persian and Central Asian decorative traditions, while maintaining the spiritual dignity required for Buddhist religious contexts. The architectural synthesis evident in Kushan religious buildings incorporated structural innovations and decorative elements from multiple cultural traditions, creating distinctive building types that served diverse religious communities while expressing unified imperial patronage. Buddhist monasteries constructed during this period featured Greek-influenced column orders supporting traditional Indian stupa forms, while Zoroastrian fire temples incorporated Persian architectural principles with Central Asian decorative motifs that reflected the nomadic heritage of Kushan ruling elites. The technical sophistication of these buildings required skilled architects capable of integrating diverse structural systems while creating aesthetically coherent designs that satisfied different religious requirements. The Great Stupa at Purushapura exemplified the architectural achievements possible through cultural synthesis, as its massive scale required engineering solutions that combined Roman concrete technology with traditional Indian construction techniques while incorporating decorative elements from Greek, Persian, and Central Asian artistic traditions. The foundation work employed Roman-influenced concrete formulations that provided structural stability for the enormous weight of the superstructure, while the decorative sculptural program featured Gandharan artistic styles that synthesized diverse cultural influences into coherent visual narratives depicting Buddhist religious themes. The monastery complexes constructed to support the Fourth Buddhist Council demonstrated the practical applications of architectural synthesis in creating functional buildings that accommodated diverse cultural practices while facilitating scholarly collaboration across linguistic and philosophical boundaries. The heating systems developed for Kashmir's harsh climate incorporated Persian architectural principles adapted to Buddhist monastic requirements, while the library facilities featured storage systems designed to preserve manuscripts written in multiple scripts and languages. The dormitory arrangements accommodated monks from different cultural backgrounds while maintaining the communal living standards required by Buddhist monastic discipline. Kushan royal patronage of diverse religious communities created unprecedented opportunities for theological dialogue and philosophical exchange that influenced religious development throughout the empire and beyond. The imperial policy of supporting multiple religious traditions simultaneously required sophisticated diplomatic approaches that balance competing theological claims while maintaining political unity across culturally diverse populations. Buddhist monasteries, Zoroastrian fire temples, Greek sanctuaries, and traditional Central Asian ritual sites received imperial funding and protection, creating an environment where different religious traditions could develop and interact without the constraints imposed by exclusive state religions. The patronage of Buddhist institutions under Kushan rule extended beyond simple financial support to encompass active participation in theological development and scholarly activities that shaped the evolution of Buddhist philosophy and practice. Royal sponsorship of the Fourth Buddhist Council provided resources for systematic doctrinal discussions that produced standardized formulations of Mahayana concepts, while facilitating the translation of Buddhist texts into multiple languages that made these teachings accessible to diverse populations throughout the empire. The monastery construction projects funded by imperial resources created centres for Buddhist scholarship that attracted monks and scholars from across Asia. The support provided to Zoroastrian communities reflected the Persian cultural influences within Kushan imperial ideology, while accommodating the religious preferences of populations in territories with established Zoroastrian traditions. Fire temples constructed under imperial patronage incorporated traditional Persian architectural elements while adapting to local building materials and construction techniques, creating distinctive Zoroastrian religious complexes that served both spiritual and political functions. The maintenance of sacred fires required specialized priestly training and imported materials that demonstrated imperial commitment to supporting diverse religious practices. The patronage of Greek religious traditions maintained connections with the Hellenistic cultural heritage of Bactrian territories, while providing religious services for populations descended from Greek settlers and administrators. Greek sanctuaries received imperial funding for construction and maintenance activities, while preserving traditional Greek religious practices and philosophical traditions that contributed to the intellectual diversity of Kushan imperial culture. The integration of Greek deities into Kushan royal iconography, evident in coin designs and architectural decorations, demonstrated the continued influence of Hellenistic religious concepts within imperial ideology. The accommodation of traditional Central Asian religious practices within imperial patronage policies maintained connections with the nomadic heritage of Kushan ruling elites, while ensuring the loyalty of tribal populations who provided essential military services and controlled strategic frontier territories. Archaeological evidence from sites like Surk Kotal reveals the construction of religious complexes that combined traditional nomadic ceremonial features with Persian architectural influences, creating distinctive ritual spaces that served both spiritual and political functions. The fire altars and offering platforms constructed at these sites incorporated traditional Central Asian decorative motifs with Persian religious symbolism. The development of Mahayana Buddhist philosophy during the Kushan period represented one of the most significant intellectual achievements in Asian religious history, as the systematic formulation of concepts like the Bodhisattva ideal and the doctrine of emptiness created theological frameworks that influenced Buddhist thought for centuries. The Fourth Buddhist Council provided institutional support for philosophical discussions that synthesized diverse intellectual traditions while establishing standardized terminology and doctrinal formulations that enabled effective communication between Buddhist communities with different cultural backgrounds and philosophical orientations. The Bodhisattva concept developed during this period reflected the influence of diverse cultural traditions on Buddhist theological development, as the ideal of postponing personal enlightenment to assist others in achieving liberation incorporated elements from Greek heroic traditions, Persian concepts of divine intervention in human affairs, and traditional Indian notions of spiritual compassion. The systematic formulation of bodhisattva vows and practices required extensive philosophical discussions that drew upon multiple intellectual traditions while maintaining consistency with fundamental Buddhist principles regarding the nature of suffering and liberation. The doctrine of emptiness formulated during Kushan Buddhist councils represented sophisticated philosophical synthesis that incorporated elements from Greek logical traditions, Persian metaphysical concepts, and Indian philosophical analysis while creating distinctive Buddhist approaches to understanding reality and consciousness. The technical terminology developed to express these concepts required careful translation between Sanskrit, Greek, Bactrian, and other languages used by participating scholars, creating standardized philosophical vocabularies that enabled precise communication of complex ideas across cultural and linguistic boundaries. The iconographic development of Buddhist art during this period reflected the theological innovations emerging from Mahayana philosophy, while demonstrating the influence of diverse artistic traditions on religious visual expression. The creation of standardized visual representations for bodhisattva figures required careful negotiation between Greek artistic conventions emphasizing physical beauty and Buddhist theological requirements for depicting spiritual qualities through visual media. The elaborate jewelry, flowing garments, and compassionate facial expressions of bodhisattva sculptures reflected Persian and Central Asian decorative traditions while maintaining the spiritual dignity required for Buddhist devotional practices. The linguistic diversity of Kushan territories required sophisticated administrative approaches that accommodated multiple writing systems, legal traditions, and communication protocols, while maintaining effective governance across culturally diverse populations. Imperial inscriptions were produced in Greek, Kharoshthi, Brahmi, and Bactrian scripts, ensuring effective communication with different population groups, while demonstrating imperial recognition of linguistic diversity as a valuable cultural resource rather than an administrative obstacle. The development of standardized translation procedures enabled effective policy implementation across linguistic boundaries while preserving local legal traditions and cultural practices. The administrative multilingualism of Kushan government operations required specialized training programs for bureaucratic personnel capable of working effectively in multiple linguistic environments while maintaining consistent policy implementation across diverse territories. Archaeological evidence from administrative sites reveals the use of multilingual document formats that provided identical information in different scripts and languages, ensuring that imperial policies were understood accurately by diverse population groups. The technical challenges of maintaining consistent legal and administrative terminology across multiple languages required sophisticated linguistic analysis and standardization procedures. The Kharoshthi script, adapted from Aramaic writing systems during the Achaemenid period, served as the primary administrative language for territories in Gandhara and the Kabul Valley, where this writing system had been established through centuries of use in commercial and legal contexts. Imperial documents written in Kharoshthi script demonstrate the continued vitality of this writing system under Kushan rule, while revealing the adaptation of traditional administrative terminology to express new political concepts and institutional arrangements introduced by nomadic rulers. The preservation of Kharoshthi legal traditions within Kushan administrative systems maintained continuity with established local practices while accommodating imperial policy requirements. The Brahmi script, used primarily in territories with established Indian cultural traditions, required adaptation to express Central Asian political concepts and administrative terminology that had no direct equivalents in traditional Indian governmental systems. Imperial inscriptions in Brahmi script reveal the development of new vocabulary and grammatical constructions that combined Sanskrit linguistic structures with Persian and Central Asian political terminology, creating distinctive administrative languages that reflected the cultural synthesis characteristic of Kushan imperial society. The training of scribes capable of producing accurate Brahmi documents required specialized educational programs that transmitted both linguistic skills and cultural knowledge necessary for effective cross-cultural communication. The Bactrian script, developed specifically for the Iranian language spoken by populations in the Kushan heartland, represented one of the most significant linguistic innovations of the period, as it adapted Greek alphabetic writing to express Iranian phonetic structures while incorporating specialized terminology for administrative and religious concepts. The development of standardized Bactrian orthography required systematic linguistic analysis that established consistent spelling conventions and grammatical rules while accommodating regional dialectical variations. The production of legal documents, commercial contracts, and religious texts in Bactrian script created a substantial literary corpus that preserves Central Asian cultural traditions while facilitating their integration with other linguistic communities within the empire. The Greek script continued to serve important functions in Kushan administrative systems, particularly for international diplomatic correspondence and commercial documents that required recognition by Greek-speaking communities throughout the Mediterranean world and Central Asia. The maintenance of Greek scribal traditions within Kushan bureaucratic systems preserved connections with Hellenistic cultural heritage, while providing practical communication capabilities for international trade and diplomatic relationships. The adaptation of Greek administrative terminology to express Central Asian political concepts created distinctive governmental vocabularies that reflected the cultural synthesis achieved under Kushan rule. The sophisticated administrative multilingualism established under Kanishka created the institutional foundation necessary for the Kushan Empire to assume its dominant role in controlling the most lucrative segments of Silk Road commerce, as the standardized translation procedures and cross-cultural communication protocols enabled Kushan merchants and administrators to negotiate complex commercial agreements with trading partners spanning from Roman territories in the west to Han Chinese markets in the east. The empire's strategic geographic position, controlling the essential mountain passes and river valleys that connected the major economic regions of Eurasia, transformed what had traditionally been a collection of independent trade routes into an integrated commercial network under unified political authority. Kushan control over the Khyber Pass, the Wakhan Corridor, and the strategic cities of the Tarim Basin enabled imperial administrators to implement coordinated commercial policies that eliminated the fragmented taxation systems and security arrangements that had previously plagued Trans-Asian trade. Merchant caravans travelling under Kushan protection could now traverse distances exceeding 3,000 kilometres without encountering multiple customs barriers, tribute demands or security negotiations that had traditionally added substantial costs and delays to long-distance commercial operations. The standardization of weights, measures and currency exchange rates across Kushan territories created unprecedented efficiency in commercial transactions, while reducing opportunities for fraud and manipulation that had historically undermined confidence in long-distance trade relationships. Archaeological excavations at Begram have revealed the extraordinary diversity and volume of luxury goods flowing through Kushan commercial networks during the 2nd century AD, with sealed storage chambers containing artifacts that demonstrate direct trade relationships with virtually every major economic centre in the known world. Roman bronze vessels decorated with scenes from classical mythology and executed in the finest Mediterranean artistic traditions were discovered alongside Chinese lacquerware featuring intricate geometric patterns and sophisticated preservation techniques that maintained their original appearance despite centuries of storage. Indian ivory carvings depicting Hindu religious themes shared storage space with Alexandrian glassware that demonstrated the technical mastery of Egyptian craftsmen in creating translucent vessels with complex decorative elements embedded within the glass matrix. The systematic organization of these storage facilities at Begram indicates sophisticated inventory management systems that tracked goods according to origin, quality grade, destination market, and seasonal availability factors that affected pricing and distribution strategies. Separate chambers were designated for different categories of merchandise, with climate-controlled environments that prevented deterioration of organic materials while providing security measures that protected valuable items from theft or damage. The discovery of detailed inventories written in multiple scripts suggests that Kushan commercial operations employed standardized record-keeping procedures that enabled accurate tracking of goods throughout complex distribution networks spanning thousands of kilometers. The silk trade monopoly established by Kushan merchants required intricate coordination with Chinese producers, Central Asian transporters, and Mediterranean distributors that involved financial instruments and commercial practices far more sophisticated than simple barter exchanges or immediate cash transactions. Archaeological evidence from Nia and other Tarim Basin sites reveals the use of standardized contracts written in Kharoshthi script that specified quality grades, delivery schedules, and payment terms for silk purchases that were negotiated months in advance of actual production. These contracts included provisions for quality inspection procedures, penalty clauses for delivery failures, and insurance arrangements that protected against losses from natural disasters, banditry, or political disruptions along the lengthy transportation routes. Chinese silk producers received advance payments through Kushan commercial networks that enabled them to purchase raw materials, maintain skilled workforce, and invest in equipment improvements that enhanced both production capacity and product quality. The standardization of silk grading systems enabled Chinese producers to receive premium prices for superior quality materials while ensuring that Kushan merchants could guarantee consistent product standards to their Mediterranean customers. Archaeological discoveries of silk production equipment at sites throughout the Tarim Basin indicate that Kushan merchants established processing facilities that performed initial quality control and packaging operations before silk was transported westward toward Persian and Roman markets. The complexity of silk transportation logistics required the establishment of permanent Kushan commercial installations throughout the Tarim Basin cities, where imperial representatives coordinated caravan schedules, arranged security escorts, and managed the transfer of goods between different transportation systems adapted to specific geographic conditions. Camel caravans suitable for desert crossings were organised at Kashgar and Yarkand, while yak trains capable of handling high-altitude mountain passes were assembled at Khotan and other cities near the Tibetan Plateau. The coordination of these different transportation systems required detailed knowledge of seasonal weather patterns, animal breeding cycles, and local political conditions that affected the safety and efficiency of commercial operations. Spice trade operations centered on the procurement and distribution of high-value aromatics and medicinal plants that commanded extraordinary prices in Roman and Persian markets due to their rarity, preservation challenges, and the distances involved in their transportation. Cinnamon from Ceylon required coordination with maritime trading networks that connected Indian Ocean commercial centres with overland routes controlled by Kushan merchants. The preservation of cinnamon bark during extended transportation periods required specialized packaging techniques, using sealed containers with moisture-absorbing materials that prevented deterioration while maintaining the aromatic qualities that determined market value. Pepper from the Malabar coast involved even more complex procurement arrangements, as Kushan merchants established permanent trading posts along the western Indian coastline, where they negotiated directly with local producers while coordinating with maritime transportation networks that connected Indian ports with Persian Gulf commercial centres. The standardization of pepper quality grades enabled Kushan merchants to guarantee consistent product characteristics to their customers while providing Indian producers with reliable markets and stable pricing that encouraged increased cultivation and improved processing techniques. Cardamom procurement from the Western Ghats required specialized knowledge of cultivation cycles and harvesting techniques that affected both the quantity and quality of available supplies. Kushan commercial agents established relationships with local tribal groups who controlled cardamom growing regions, providing them with advance payments and technical assistance that increased production while ensuring preferential access to premium quality products. The delicate nature of cardamom pods required specialized transportation containers and handling procedures that prevented damage during the lengthy journey to Mediterranean markets. Saffron from Kashmir represented one of the most valuable commodities in Kushan trade networks due to its extraordinary market price and the specialized cultivation techniques required for its production. The procurement of saffron required coordination with local producers who possessed generations of experience in the careful hand harvesting of saffron threads from crocus flowers during the brief autumn harvest season. Kushan merchants provided financial support for saffron cultivation while establishing quality control procedures that ensured only the finest grade products entered international trade networks. The precious stone trade encompassed systematic exploitation of gemstone deposits throughout the mountainous regions controlled by Kushan territories, where lapis lazuli, rubies, emeralds, and various semi-precious stones were extracted through mining operations that combined traditional techniques with technological innovations adapted from Roman and Chinese engineering practices. The Sarasang lapis lazuli mines in the Hindu Kush mountains produced the finest quality blue stones available in ancient markets, with Kushan control over these deposits, enabling the empire to regulate global supplies while maintaining artificially high prices through careful production management. Ruby mining operations in the Pamir mountain regions required sophisticated engineering solutions for extracting gems from hard rock formations at elevations exceeding 4,000 meters, where extreme weather conditions and limited accessibility created substantial logistical challenges. Kushan mining engineers developed specialized extraction techniques that combined traditional hand tools with mechanical devices adapted from Chinese and Roman mining technology, enabling more efficient extraction while minimizing damage to valuable gemstones during the mining process. Emerald deposits in the Swat Valley were exploited through mining operations that employed hundreds of workers during favorable seasons, while maintaining year-round security measures that protected valuable deposits from unauthorized extraction. The technical challenges of emerald mining required specialized knowledge of geological formations and extraction techniques that preserved the clarity and color characteristics that determined market value. Kushan mining operations established quality grading systems that categorized emeralds according to size, clarity, and color intensity, enabling more efficient marketing while ensuring that only premium quality stones entered international trade networks. The urban transformation of major Kushan commercial centers reflected the enormous wealth generated through control of international trade networks, as cities like Mathura, Purushapura, and Kapisa underwent massive expansion projects that created specialized infrastructure designed specifically to support large-scale commercial operations. Mathura's development as the primary commercial hub for trade between Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent required the construction of extensive warehouse complexes, expanded port facilities along the Yamuna River, and specialized markets designed for different categories of luxury goods. The warehouse district at Mathura incorporated advanced engineering solutions for the storage challenges posed by the diverse characteristics of different trade goods, with separate facilities designed for textiles, spices, precious stones, and metalwork that required different environmental conditions and security measures. Textile storage facilities featured sophisticated ventilation systems that prevented moisture damage, while maintaining stable temperatures that preserved fabric quality during extended storage periods. Underground chambers provided secure storage for precious stones and valuable metalwork while protecting these items from both theft and environmental damage. The port facilities at Mathura were expanded to accommodate the increased volume of river traffic generated by enhanced trade relationships, with new loading docks designed specifically for efficient transfer of goods between river barges and overland caravans. Standardized loading equipment and procedures reduced handling time while minimizing opportunities for damage or theft during the transfer process. The construction of covered loading areas provided protection from weather conditions that could damage sensitive merchandise during the transfer operations. Purushapura's development as a major commercial center focused on its role as the primary transshipment point for goods moving between Central Asian and Indian markets through the Khyber Pass corridor. The city's strategic location required specialized infrastructure for handling the seasonal fluctuations in commercial traffic that resulted from weather conditions affecting mountain pass accessibility. Massive storage complexes were constructed to accommodate goods during winter months when mountain passes became impassable, while financial institutions provided credit services that enabled commercial operations to continue despite seasonal transportation interruptions. The commercial infrastructure at Purashapura included innovative solutions for the security challenges posed by concentrating large quantities of valuable goods in urban environments during extended storage periods. Multi-story warehouse buildings incorporated fire-resistant construction techniques using stone foundations and brick walls that protected merchandise from both accidental fires and deliberate arson attacks. Guard towers positioned throughout the warehouse districts provided surveillance capabilities while housing security personnel responsible for protecting valuable merchandise. Kapisa emerged as the primary commercial centre for northern trade relationships, with its location in the Kabul Valley providing access to mountain passes leading toward the Tarim Basin, while maintaining connections with Gandharan commercial networks. The city's development required substantial investment in transportation infrastructure, including improved roads capable of handling heavy-wheeled vehicles and relay stations that provided maintenance and supply services for merchant caravans, travelling between Kapisa and distant markets in Chinese territories. The construction of caravanserais along major trade routes represented one of the most significant infrastructure investments undertaken by Kushan administrators, as these facilities provided essential services that enabled merchant caravans to traverse vast distances while maintaining the security and condition of valuable merchandise. Caravanserais were strategically positioned at intervals corresponding to standard daily travel distances for loaded caravans, typically 25 to 30 kilometres apart, ensuring that merchants could reach secure accommodation before nightfall, while avoiding the risks associated with camping in unsecured locations. The architectural design of Kushan caravanserais incorporated standardized features that provided consistent services while adapting to local geographic and climatic conditions. Central courtyards provided secure areas for livestock, while surrounding chambers offered accommodation for merchants and storage space for goods. Defensive walls with limited access points enabled effective security measures, while guard towers provided surveillance capabilities that protected against bandit attacks. Water storage systems and feeding facilities for animals ensured that caravans could maintain their livestock in good condition during rest periods. The irrigation systems developed under Kushan administration supported both agricultural production and urban water supply requirements that were essential for sustaining the large populations concentrated in major commercial centres. The expansion of existing irrigation networks in Bactria and Gandhara required sophisticated engineering solutions that increased water availability while preventing conflicts between agricultural and urban users. Canal systems were expanded and improved using engineering techniques that combined traditional local knowledge with innovations adapted from Roman and Chinese hydraulic engineering practices. The construction of new irrigation channels required careful attention to gradient calculations and flow management that ensured consistent water delivery while preventing erosion and siltation problems that could compromise long-term system effectiveness. Stone-lined channels and distribution structures provided durability while standardized measurement systems enabled equitable water allocation among different users. Maintenance procedures were established that ensured continued system operation while providing employment opportunities for local populations. Fortified trading posts established along major routes provided security services for merchant caravans, while serving as administrative centres where Kushan officials collected customs duties, resolved commercial disputes, and coordinated transportation logistics. These installations were strategically positioned at geographic bottlenecks where all traffic was required to pass through controlled checkpoints, enabling effective monitoring of commercial activities while providing security services that protected merchants from banditry and extortion. The monetary standardization that had enabled Kushan commercial dominance across Eurasia began showing signs of strain during the final decades of the 2nd century AD, as the enormous costs of maintaining military garrisons across territories spanning from the Amu Darya to the Yamuna River created fiscal pressures that forced successive rulers to implement currency debasements that gradually undermined confidence in imperial coinage. Huvishka, ascending to the throne around 150 AD following Kanishka's death, inherited an empire at the zenith of its territorial extent, but struggling with the administrative challenges of governing diverse populations across vast distances while maintaining the military strength necessary to defend against external threats and internal rebellions. Archaeological evidence from mints at Mathura, Purushapura, and Kapisa reveals systematic reductions in gold content during Huvishka's reign, with dinars that had maintained 96% purity under Kanishka declining to approximately 85% purity by 170 AD. This debasement reflected not merely fiscal expedience, but fundamental structural problems in imperial finances, as the costs of maintaining professional military units, administrative bureaucracies, and infrastructure projects exceeded the revenues generated through taxation and commercial duties. The reduction in gold content was accompanied by decreased weight standards, with coins averaging 7.8 grams compared to the 8.2 gram standard established under Vima Kadphises. The administrative decentralization that characterized Huvishka's reign emerged from practical necessities rather than deliberate policy choices, as the vast distances separating major administrative centers made centralized decision-making increasingly ineffective for addressing local challenges that required immediate responses. Regional governors in Bactria, Gandhara, and the Tarim Basin territories began exercising greater autonomy in fiscal matters, military recruitment, and commercial regulation, creating de facto independent administrative zones that maintained nominal allegiance to imperial authority while operating according to local priorities and conditions. Provincial governors appointed during this period came increasingly from local elite families rather than the central Kushan nobility, reflecting both the practical advantages of local knowledge and the growing difficulty of maintaining effective communication and control across the empire's extensive territories. These locally appointed administrators possessed intimate understanding of regional economic conditions, tribal relationships, and seasonal patterns that affected agricultural production and commercial activities, enabling more responsive governance while gradually weakening the bonds connecting peripheral territories to the imperial centre. The succession of Vasudeva I around 190 AD marked the beginning of the most acute phase of imperial decline, as his reign coincided with intensifying external pressures from multiple directions that stretched imperial military resources beyond their sustainable limits. The rising Sassanid Empire under Ardashir I launched systematic campaigns to expand Persian control over territories in eastern Iran and Afghanistan that had been under Kushan influence since the time of Kanishka, employing professional military units equipped with advanced siege equipment and coordinated tactical formations that proved superior to traditional Kushan cavalry-based forces. Sassanid military innovations included the extensive use of heavily armoured cavalry units known as cataphracts, whose steel armour and long lances provided decisive advantages in direct confrontations with Kushan forces that relied primarily on mounted archery tactics developed for steppe warfare. The Persian forces also employed sophisticated siege techniques adapted from Roman military engineering, including the use of torsion artillery and undermining operations that proved effective against the mountain fortresses that had traditionally protected Kushan territories in the Hindu Kush region. The Sassanid conquest of Merv around 200 AD eliminated Kushan control over critical segments of the northern Silk Road routes, while providing Persian forces with advanced bases for further expansion into Central Asian territories. The loss of Merv disrupted established commercial networks that had generated substantial tax revenues for the Kushan treasury, while demonstrating to other regional powers that Kushan military capabilities were no longer sufficient to protect their territorial claims against determined opposition from well-organized enemies. Archaeological evidence from sites along the Amu Darya reveals systematic destruction layers dating to this period, with burned fortifications, abandoned settlements, and scattered weapon fragments indicating the intensity of the Sassanid military campaigns. The excavations at Termez show evidence of hasty abandonment, with valuable objects left behind and defensive walls showing signs of rapid demolition that suggests organised withdrawal rather than siege warfare, indicating that Kushan forces recognised their inability to defend these positions against superior Sassanid military capabilities. Chinese military activity in Central Asia intensified during the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries AD, as successive Han Dynasty generals sought to re-establish Chinese influence over the Tarim Basin cities that had been under Kushan control since Kanishka's conquests. The Chinese forces employed different tactical approaches than the Sassanids, focusing on rapid cavalry movements and siege operations designed to capture urban centres, while avoiding prolonged confrontations with Kushan field armies that might have enabled imperial forces to concentrate their resources for effective resistance. The Chinese military campaigns targeted the economic foundations of Kushan power in Central Asia, rather than seeking territorial conquest for its own sake, as Chinese strategists recognized that control over commercial routes and urban tax bases would prove more valuable than occupation of pastoral territories that required substantial garrison forces to maintain. The capture of Kashgar around 205 AD provided Chinese forces with control over the critical junction where northern and southern Silk Road routes converged, enabling them to regulate commercial traffic while collecting customs revenues that had previously supported Kushan imperial finances. The loss of Kushan influence in the Tarim Basin created cascading effects throughout the empire's commercial networks, as merchant caravans that had relied on unified imperial protection and standardized procedures now faced fragmented political authority and competing taxation systems that increased transaction costs while reducing the security and reliability of long-distance trade operations. Archaeological evidence from Kushan commercial installations at Khotan and Yarkand shows systematic abandonment during this period, with valuable equipment and inventory left behind as imperial administrators withdrew rather than attempting to maintain operations under deteriorating political and economic conditions. Internal succession disputes became increasingly frequent and destructive during Vasudeva Phan's reign, as the weakening of central authority encouraged rival claimants from various branches of the royal family to assert competing claims to imperial power. These succession conflicts differed from earlier dynastic disputes in their geographic scope and duration, as rival claimants established independent power bases in different regions of the empire, while maintaining armies that drained imperial resources without contributing to external defence requirements. The succession dispute following Vasudeva Phan's death around 225 AD fragmented the empire into competing regional kingdoms that maintained Kushan royal titles and ceremonial traditions while exercising independent authority over taxation, military recruitment, and commercial regulation. Archaeological evidence suggests that at least 3 separate claimants established royal courts in different territories, with one centred in Mathura controlling parts of northern India, another based in Purushapura governing Gandharan territories, and a third maintaining authority over remaining Bactrian possessions. Regional autonomy movements that had emerged during earlier reigns as practical administrative adaptations now transformed into independence movements as local elites recognized that their territories could achieve greater prosperity and security through autonomous governance rather than continued participation in an increasingly dysfunctional imperial system. the governors of major commercial centres like Taxila and Bagram began issuing their own coinage while maintaining independent diplomatic relationships with neighbouring powers, effectively establishing city-state systems that preserved local prosperity while abandoning imperial obligations. Archaeological excavations at Taxila reveal evidence of continued commercial prosperity during the early decades of the 3rd century AD, despite the fragmentation of imperial authority, with new construction projects and expanded workshop facilities indicating that local autonomy provided economic advantages that compensated for the loss of imperial protection and coordination. The discovery of coin hoards containing issues from multiple regional rulers alongside foreign currencies suggests that local merchants adapted to political fragmentation by developing flexible commercial relationships that maintained trade networks despite the absence of unified imperial authority. The breakdown of trade monopolies that had generated enormous wealth for the Kushan Empire during its peak period resulted from the combination of external military pressures, internal political fragmentation, and the emergence of alternative commercial routes that bypassed territories under Kushan control. Sassanid expansion into Central Asia enabled Persian merchants to establish direct relationships with Chinese commercial networks, while avoiding the customs duties and transportation costs associated with Kushan-controlled routes through the Hindu Kush and Karakoram mountain regions. The development of maritime trade routes connecting Indian Ocean commercial centres with Persian Gulf ports provided alternative channels for silk, spice, and luxury goods that had traditionally moved through Kushan overland networks. Archaeological evidence from ports along the western Indian coastline shows increased construction activity and expanded warehouse facilities during this period, indicating that merchants were redirecting their commercial activities toward maritime transportation systems that offered greater security and lower costs than the increasingly unreliable overland routes through fragmenting Kushan territories. Chinese commercial policies during this period actively encouraged the development of alternative trade routes that reduced dependence on Kushan commercial networks while providing Chinese merchants with more direct access to Western markets. The establishment of Chinese trading posts in Sogdiana and other Central Asian regions created competing commercial networks that offered silk producers alternative distribution channels while providing Western merchants with access to Chinese goods without the substantial markup costs associated with Kushan commercial intermediation. Archaeological evidence of urban decline becomes increasingly pronounced in major Kushan cities during the middle decades of the 3rd century AD, with excavation layers showing systematic abandonment of residential districts, commercial facilities, and public buildings that had flourished during the empire's peak period. Mathura, which had served as one of the most important commercial centres in the Kushan Empire, shows evidence of population decline beginning around 240 AD, with residential areas being abandoned and commercial districts showing reduced activity levels indicated by decreased quantities of imported goods and luxury objects. The abandonment of Bagram represents one of the most dramatic examples of urban decline during this period, as archaeological evidence indicates that the city's extensive warehouse complexes and commercial facilities were systematically emptied and abandoned around 250 AD. The careful removal of valuable goods and equipment suggests organised withdrawal rather than sudden disaster, indicating that commercial operators recognised the deteriorating conditions and relocated their activities to more stable regions, rather than attempting to maintain operations under increasingly difficult circumstances. Prushapura experienced gradual decline rather than sudden abandonment, with archaeological evidence showing the conversion of commercial buildings to residential use and the abandonment of specialised workshop districts that had produced luxury goods for export markets. The city's role as a major transshipment point for trade between Central Asia and India became less important as alternative routes developed, while political instability made the maintenance of large commercial operations increasingly risky and unprofitable. The archaeological record from Kapisa shows similar patterns of decline, with evidence of reduced construction activity and the abandonment of public buildings that had been maintained through imperial funding during earlier periods. The city's strategic location in the Kabul Valley continued to provide some commercial advantages, but the volume of trade moving through the region declined substantially as merchants sought alternative routes that avoided territories affected by political instability and military conflicts. Defensive installations throughout the empire show evidence of hasty abandonment during this period, with archaeological excavations revealing weapons and equipment left behind as garrison forces withdrew to more defensible positions or were reassigned to protect core territorial regions. The systematic abandonment of frontier fortifications created security vacuums that encouraged tribal raids and bandit activities that further disrupted commercial operations while demonstrating the imperial government's inability to maintain effective territorial control. The irrigation systems that had supported agricultural prosperity in Bactria and Gandhara began showing signs of deterioration during this period, as the imperial government lacked the resources necessary to maintain complex hydraulic infrastructure that required constant attention and periodic major repairs. Archaeological evidence from canal systems shows silting problems and structural damage that reduced water delivery capacity while affecting agricultural productivity in regions that had previously generated substantial tax revenues for imperial finances. The decline in agricultural productivity created cascading effects throughout the imperial economy, as reduced crop yields meant lower tax collections while increasing the costs of supplying urban populations and military garrisons with essential food supplies. The abandonment of marginal agricultural areas forced rural populations to migrate toward urban centres or seek opportunities in neighbouring territories, creating demographic pressures that strained the resources of remaining productive regions while reducing the overall population base available for taxation and military recruitment. Military recruitment became increasingly difficult as the empire's fiscal crisis made it impossible to maintain competitive compensation packages that could attract qualified personnel, while the deteriorating security situation made military service increasingly dangerous and unpopular among potential recruits. Archaeological evidence from military installations shows the use of lower quality weapons and equipment during this period, indicating reduced investment in military capabilities, while suggesting that recruitment standards were lowered to maintain minimum force levels despite resource constraints. The deteriorating military situation along the empire's western frontiers reached a critical juncture when Shapur I launched his systematic invasion of Kushan territories around 230 AD, exploiting the fragmented political authority and depleted military resources that had resulted from decades of internal succession disputes and administrative decentralization. Unlike previous Persian incursions that had focused on raiding for tribute and territorial adjustments, Shapur's campaigns represented a coordinated strategy for permanent territorial annexation that would establish Sassanid control over the lucrative Central Asian trade routes, while eliminating Kushan influence from regions that had been contested between the two empires for generations. Shapur's military forces combined traditional Persian heavy cavalry with innovative siege techniques adapted from Roman military engineering, creating composite armies capable of conducting both rapid cavalry operations across open terrain and prolonged siege operations against the mountain fortresses that protected key Kushan administrative centres. The Sassanid cataphracts, encased in steel lamella armour that provided protection for both rider and horse, proved devastatingly effective against Kushan cavalry units, whose traditional tactics relied on mounted archery and mobility rather than direct confrontation with heavily armoured opponents. The Siege of Balkh in 232 AD demonstrated the superior engineering capabilities of Sassanid military forces, as Persian engineers employed sophisticated undermining techniques that exploited geological weaknesses in the city's defensive walls, while torsion artillery provided covering fire that prevented effective counter-siege operations by the defenders. Archaeological excavations at Balkh reveal extensive destruction layers from this period, with collapsed defensive walls showing evidence of systematic demolition through coordinated undermining and artillery bombardment that overcame fortifications that had withstood previous attacks for centuries. The systematic nature of Shapur's conquest operations indicates careful advanced planning that coordinated military campaigns with diplomatic initiatives designed to encourage defections among Kushan regional governors and local elite populations. Persian diplomatic agents offered favourable terms to local administrators willing to acknowledge Sassanid authority, including confirmation of existing property rights, maintenance of traditional legal systems, and appointment to positions within the new administrative hierarchy that preserve their local influence while integrating them into Persian imperial structures. Archaeological evidence from administrative centres throughout the conquered territories reveals the rapid implementation of Persian governmental systems that combined Sassanid imperial authority with accommodation of existing local institutions and cultural practices. Fire altars constructed at sites like Surk Kotal incorporated traditional Zoroastrian architectural elements with local building techniques and decorative motifs, creating religious complexes that demonstrated Persian imperial ideology while respecting regional artistic traditions and construction capabilities. The establishment of the Kushano-Sassanid kingdom represented an innovative administrative solution that enabled Persian imperial control while maintaining the cultural and religious diversity that had characterized Kushan territories. Rather than imposing uniform Persian administrative systems throughout the conquered regions, Shapur implemented a vassal kingdom structure that preserved local Kushan royal titles and ceremonial traditions, while ensuring ultimate political authority remained with Sassanid imperial officials appointed to oversee military and fiscal policy. The first Kushano-Sassanid rulers, appointed from among cooperative members of the Kushan royal family, maintained traditional royal iconography on their coinage while incorporating Sassanid imperial symbols that acknowledged their subordinate status within the Persian imperial hierarchy. Archaeological analysis of coins issued during this transitional period reveals sophisticated attempts to balance competing political and cultural requirements, with obverse portraits maintaining Kushan artistic conventions, while reverse designs incorporated Persian fire altar symbols and royal titles that expressed dual allegiance to both local traditions and imperial authority. The administrative reorganization implemented under Sassanid suzerainty created hybrid governmental structures that combined Persian bureaucratic efficiency with accommodation of diverse local legal systems and cultural practices that had evolved under Kushan rule. Regional governors appointed by Persian imperial authorities worked alongside traditional Kushan administrative personnel, creating dual administrative hierarchies that enabled effective policy implementation while maintaining continuity with established local practices that affected taxation, legal proceedings, and commercial regulation. Taxation systems under Kushano-Sassanid administration reflected the Persian emphasis on systematic revenue collection, while accommodating the diverse economic structures that characterized different regions within the former Kushan territories. Agricultural taxes in Bactrian territories were calculated according to Persian assessment methods that evaluated land productivity and crop yields, while commercial taxes in urban centres maintained Kushan precedents that had proven effective for regulating trade activities without discouraging commercial investment and development. The Persian administration's approach to religious policy in the Kushano-Sassanid territories demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the complex religious landscape that had developed under Kushan imperial patronage, as attempts to impose uniform Zoroastrian practices would have created unnecessary resistance, while potentially disrupting the social stability that enabled effective governance and revenue collection. Instead, Sassanid administrators implemented policies that promoted Zoroastrian institutions while tolerating and even supporting existing Buddhist monasteries, Hindu temples, and local religious traditions that commanded popular loyalty. Buddhist monasteries in Gandhara and other regions continued to receive patronage from Kushano-Sassanid rulers despite the Zoroastrian imperial ideology of their Persian overlords, reflecting both practical political considerations and the recognition that Buddhist institutions provided valuable social services including education, healthcare, and commercial mediation that supported regional stability and prosperity. Archaeological evidence from monastery sites shows continued construction activity during the early Kushano-Sassanid period, with new buildings incorporating Persian architectural elements alongside traditional Buddhist design features that created distinctive synthetic styles. The monastery complex at Takhti Bahi reveals particularly clear evidence of continued Buddhist institutional development under Kushano-Sassanid patronage, with construction phases dating to the mid-3 RD century AD showing substantial investment in expanded residential quarters, library facilities and ceremonial spaces that accommodated growing monastic communities while incorporating Persian decorative elements that acknowledged the new political reality. The quality of construction materials and architectural decoration indicates that Buddhist institutions maintained access to significant financial resources despite the political transition. Zoroastrian fire temples established throughout the Kushano-Sassanid territories served both religious and political functions, providing centres for Persian religious practices while creating visible symbols of Sassanid imperial authority that reinforced the political hierarchy without necessarily displacing existing religious institutions. The architectural design of these fire temples incorporated local building techniques and materials while maintaining essential Zoroastrian liturgical requirements, creating distinctive regional variations of Persian religious architecture that reflected cultural synthesis rather than simple imperial imposition. The fire temple at Surk Kotal, extensively renovated during the early Kushano-Sassanid period, exemplifies the architectural synthesis achieved under Persian administration. The original Kushan structure was expanded with additional chambers designed according to Zoroastrian liturgical requirements, while maintaining the existing fire altar and ceremonial spaces that had served traditional Central Asian religious practices. Persian architectural elements including arched doorways and decorative stucco work were integrated with existing stone construction techniques that reflected local building traditions and available materials. Numismatic evidence from the Kushano-Sassanid period provides detailed insight into the complex political relationships between Persian imperial authorities and local Kushan nobility, as coin designs evolve systematically to express changing power dynamics while maintaining symbols and iconographic elements that preserved cultural continuity with earlier Kushan traditions. Gold dinars issued during the early decades of Kushano-Sassanid rule maintained traditional Kushan weight standards and purity levels, while incorporating Persian royal titles and religious symbols that acknowledge Sassanid suzerainty. The artistic quality of Kushano-Sassanid coinage demonstrates the continued operation of skilled minting facilities that combined Persian die-cutting techniques with local artistic traditions, creating distinctive numismatic styles that reflected the cultural synthesis characteristic of the period. Portrait styles on royal coins evolved to incorporate Persian artistic conventions, including distinctive crown designs and facial hair arrangements, while maintaining Kushan iconographic elements that preserved connections with traditional imperial imagery. Billon and copper coins issued for local circulation maintained greater continuity with earlier Kushan monetary traditions, suggesting that Persian authorities recognized the practical advantages of preserving familiar currency systems that facilitated commercial transactions while avoiding the disruption that monetary reform might have created in local markets. These lower denomination coins continue to feature traditional Kushan deities and symbols alongside Persian imperial titles, creating numismatic programs that appeal to diverse population groups while expressing unified political authority. Epigraphic evidence from throughout the Kushano-Sassanid territories reveals the systematic implementation of multilingual administrative systems that accommodated the linguistic diversity of local populations while ensuring effective communication of Persian imperial policies. Official inscriptions were produced in Middle Persian, Bactrian, and local languages including Gandhari Prakrit, enabling effective policy implementation across culturally diverse regions while demonstrating imperial recognition of linguistic diversity as an administrative resource rather than an obstacle. The Rabatak inscription, discovered in Afghanistan and dating to the Kushano-Sassanid period, provides extraordinary detail regarding the administrative hierarchy and territorial organization of the vassal kingdom. The inscription identifies specific administrative positions held by both Persian appointees and local Kushan nobility, while describing territorial boundaries and taxation arrangements that reveal the sophisticated governmental structures developed to manage the complex political relationships between imperial authorities and local power holders. Administrative documents discovered at sites throughout the region demonstrate the continued use of established Kushan legal procedures and commercial practices under Persian oversight, indicating that Sassanid administrators prioritized effective governance over cultural uniformity. Legal contracts written in Kharoshthi script continue to employ traditional Kushan legal terminology and procedural requirements, while acknowledging Persian imperial authority through formulaic expressions that expressed loyalty to Sassanid rulers without fundamentally altering existing legal relationships. Commercial documents from this period reveal the adaptation of established trade networks to accommodate new political realities while maintaining the commercial relationships that generated essential tax revenues for both local administrators and Persian imperial authorities. Merchant contracts continued to employ traditional Kushan commercial terminology and procedures while incorporating Persian legal concepts and dispute resolution mechanisms that provided additional options for commercial conflict resolution. The archaeological record from urban centres throughout the Kushano-Sassanid territories shows patterns of continued commercial activity and urban development that indicate successful adaptation to the new political arrangements. Taxila maintained its position as a major commercial centre, with archaeological evidence showing continued workshop activity and residential construction that suggests sustained prosperity despite the political transition. The discovery of Persian administrative seals, alongside traditional Kushan commercial artifacts, indicates the successful integration of new governmental systems with existing economic structures. Begram's archaeological layers from the Kushano-Sassanid period reveal continued commercial activity on a reduced scale compared to the peak Kushan period, but with evidence of adaptation to new trade routes and commercial relationships that reflected changing political conditions. Persian pottery and metalwork appear alongside traditional Central Asian and Indian artifacts, indicating the development of new commercial networks that connected the region with Persian territories while maintaining established relationships with Indian and Chinese trading partners. The integration of Kushano-Sassanid territories into broader Persian imperial systems created new opportunities for cultural exchange and technological transfer that enrich both Persian and local traditions. Persian metallurgical techniques were introduced to local workshops, while traditional Central Asian crafts influenced Persian decorative arts, creating synthesis traditions that reflected the cultural diversity of the expanded Sassanid Empire. Archaeological evidence from workshop sites shows the adoption of Persian pottery techniques, alongside the continued production of traditional Kushan ceramic styles that maintained market demand while incorporating new decorative elements. Architectural developments during the Kushano-Sassanid period demonstrate the creative synthesis of Persian imperial styles with local building traditions and functional requirements. Palace complexes constructed for regional administrators incorporated Persian architectural elements including Iwan halls and decorative stucco work while adapting to local climate conditions and available building materials. The palace complex at Kalchayan shows extensive renovation during this period that created distinctive architectural styles, combining Persian imperial grandeur with practical adaptations to Central Asian environmental conditions. The military innovations and administrative adaptations developed during the Kushano-Sassanid period established precedents for governance and cultural synthesis that influenced political development across Central Asia for centuries after the collapse of unified Kushan authority. The hybrid governmental structures that balanced imperial oversight with local autonomy became models for subsequent ruling dynasties attempting to govern culturally diverse populations across vast territories, while the artistic and architectural syntheses achieved under Kushano-Sassanid patronage created distinctive regional traditions that continued evolving long after Persian political control ended. Archaeological excavations at sites throughout former Kushan territories reveal the extraordinary persistence of artistic traditions and technical innovations that originated during the empire's peak period, with Gandharan sculptural styles continuing to influence Buddhist art production across Asia for over 5 centuries after the fragmentation of imperial authority. Workshop traditions established in Taxila and Peshawar during Kanishka's reign transmitted technical knowledge through generations of craftsmen who adapted Hellenistic sculptural techniques to diverse religious and cultural requirements, creating regional artistic schools that maintained essential Gandharan characteristics while incorporating local stylistic elements. The Buddha images produced in Gandharan workshops established iconographic conventions that spread throughout Buddhist communities across Asia, with the anthropomorphic representation of the Buddha, developed by Kushan period sculptors, becoming the standard visual format for Buddhist devotional practices from Central Asia to Southeast Asia. Archaeological discoveries at sites in Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Central Asia and China reveal the systematic transmission of Gandharan artistic techniques and iconographic programs through trade networks and missionary activities that continued operating long after the collapse of the political structures that originally supported their development. The technical mastery evident in Gandharan stone carving influenced sculptural traditions far beyond Buddhist religious contexts, with the anatomical precision and emotional expression achieved by Kushan period craftsmen establishing artistic standards that affected secular art production throughout the region. Hindu temple sculptures from the Gupta period demonstrate clear influences from Gandharan artistic techniques, while Central Asian decorative arts incorporated stylistic elements that can be traced directly to innovations developed in Kushan imperial workshops during the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. The architectural innovations developed during the Kushan period created building traditions that influenced construction techniques across Central Asia and northern India for centuries after the empire's collapse. The engineering solutions developed for the Great Stupa at Purushapura established precedents for large-scale Buddhist monument construction that were adapted for subsequent projects throughout Asia, while the structural techniques employed in Kushan palace complexes influenced secular architecture from the Sassanid territories to the Chinese frontier regions. Monastery complexes constructed under Kushan patronage established architectural standards for Buddhist institutional buildings that influenced monastic construction across Asia. The functional organization of spaces for residential quarters, libraries, ceremonial halls, and workshops developed at sites like Takht-i-Bahi became templates for monastery design that were adapted to diverse geographic and cultural conditions while maintaining essential organizational principles. The heating systems, water management facilities, and storage arrangements developed for harsh Central Asian climates influenced monastery construction in Tibet, Mongolia, and other regions with similar environmental challenges. The urban planning innovations implemented in major Kushan commercial centres established precedents for city organisation that influenced urban development throughout Central Asia and northern India. The systematic organisation of commercial districts, residential areas, and administrative facilities developed in cities like Mathura and Purushapura created urban design principles that were adapted by subsequent ruling dynasties attempting to create efficient commercial and administrative centres. The integration of defensive works with commercial infrastructure established models for fortified trading cities that became standard features of Silk Road urban development. The Kushan Empire's role in facilitating cultural and technological exchange between East and West created transmission networks that continued operating long after the collapse of imperial political authority, establishing precedents for international commercial cooperation and cultural exchange that influenced Eurasian development for centuries. The standardized weights, measures, and commercial procedures developed under Kushan administration became accepted practices throughout Central Asian trade networks, reducing transaction costs and facilitating commercial relationships between diverse cultural groups. Astronomical knowledge transmission through Kushan territories established Central Asia as a crucial link in the exchange of mathematical and scientific innovations between Chinese, Indian, Persian, and Mediterranean intellectual traditions. The synthesis of diverse astronomical systems achieved by scholars working under Kushan patronage created hybrid mathematical traditions that incorporated Greek geometric methods, Indian numerical systems, Persian calendrical calculations, and Chinese observational techniques. These synthetic traditions influenced astronomical development throughout Eurasia while establishing Central Asia as a centre for scientific scholarship that continued attracting international scholars for centuries. The medical knowledge transmission facilitated by Kushan trade networks created unprecedented opportunities for the exchange of pharmaceutical knowledge and therapeutic techniques between diverse medical traditions. Buddhist monasteries serving as centres for medical education and practice under Kushan patronage established institutional frameworks for medical knowledge preservation and transmission that influenced healthcare development throughout Asia. The synthesis of Greek, Indian, Persian, and Chinese medical traditions achieved in Kushan territories created comprehensive therapeutic systems that incorporated diverse diagnostic techniques, pharmaceutical preparations, and surgical procedures. Archaeological preservation of Kushan sites began during the 19th century when British colonial administrators and military officers conducting surveys in Afghanistan and northwestern India encountered massive architectural remains and artistic artifacts that provided the first systematic evidence of the empire's extraordinary cultural achievements. The initial documentation efforts by Alexander Cunningham and other archaeological survey of India personnel established basic chronological frameworks and identified major sites that became focal points for subsequent research efforts. The discovery of the Bimaran casket in 1833 provided the first clear evidence of Gandharan artistic achievement while demonstrating the sophisticated metalworking techniques developed under Kushan patronage. The casket's intricate gold repoussé work depicting Buddha images in classical Hellenistic style revealed the extraordinary synthesis of artistic traditions achieved during the empire's peak period, while providing crucial chronological evidence through associated coin discoveries that enabled accurate dating of artistic developments. British military surveys during the Second Afghan War documented extensive architectural remains at sites throughout Afghanistan that revealed the scale and sophistication of Kushan urban development. The systematic mapping of defensive walls, residential districts, and monumental buildings at sites like Bagram and Kapisa provided detailed evidence of Kushan engineering capabilities while revealing the systematic planning that characterized imperial urban development projects. The excavations conducted by French archaeological missions in Afghanistan during the early 20th century established rigorous scientific standards for Kushan archaeological research while producing extraordinary discoveries that revolutionized understanding of the empire's cultural achievements. The work of Alfred Faucher and other French scholars at sites like Hada revealed the extraordinary diversity and technical sophistication of Gandharan sculptural traditions, while documenting the complex stratigraphic relationships that enabled accurate chronological analysis of artistic development. The Begram treasure discovered by French archaeologists in 1939 provided unprecedented evidence of the international scope of Kushan commercial networks, while demonstrating the extraordinary wealth and cultural sophistication achieved during the empire's peak period. The sealed chambers containing Roman bronzes, Chinese lacquerware, Indian ivory carvings, and Alexandrian glassware revealed direct evidence of trade relationships spanning from the Mediterranean to East Asia, while providing insight into the storage and distribution systems that supported long-distance commerce. Contemporary international excavation projects have employed advanced archaeological techniques, including ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery analysis, and scientific dating methods that have revealed previously unknown aspects of Kushan civilization, while providing more precise chronological frameworks for understanding imperial development. The collaborative research efforts involving teams from multiple countries have created comprehensive databases of Kushan archaeological evidence, while establishing international standards for site preservation and artifact conservation. The Mezanak excavations in Afghanistan have revealed extensive evidence of Kushan period copper mining operations that demonstrate the sophisticated extractive technologies and industrial organization that supported imperial wealth accumulation. The discovery of Buddhist monastery complexes integrated with mining facilities reveals the complex relationships between religious institutions, commercial activities, and imperial administration that characterized Kushan economic organization. Digital documentation projects have created comprehensive records of Kushan archaeological sites and artifacts that preserve crucial cultural heritage information, while making research materials accessible to international scholarly communities. The systematic photography, 3D modelling, and database creation efforts have established permanent records of sites and artifacts that face ongoing threats from political instability, environmental degradation, and illegal excavation activities. The Kushan Empire's significance in understanding ancient globalization processes stems from its unique position as the first political entity to successfully integrate diverse cultural traditions across the breadth of Eurasia while maintaining effective governance over territories spanning multiple climate zones, linguistic communities, and economic systems. The administrative innovations developed to govern this diverse empire established precedents for cross-cultural political organization that influenced subsequent attempts at creating multinational political entities. The religious syncretism achieved under Kushan imperial patronage created models for religious tolerance and cultural accommodation that demonstrated the practical advantages of inclusive policies over attempts to impose uniform cultural practices across diverse populations. The simultaneous support provided to Buddhist, Zoroastrian, Hindu, and traditional Central Asian religious institutions established precedents for religious pluralism that influenced political development throughout Central Asia, while demonstrating the compatibility of diverse spiritual traditions within unified political frameworks. The commercial innovations developed under Kushan administration established fundamental principles of international trade organization that influence commercial development throughout Eurasia. The standardization of currency systems, weights and measures, and commercial procedures created frameworks for international commerce that reduced transaction costs while facilitating trade relationships between culturally diverse commercial communities. These innovations established precedents for commercial law and international trade regulation that influenced the economic development for centuries. The study of nomadic state formation through Kushan historical development provides crucial insights into the processes by which pastoral societies adapted to sedentary governance challenges while maintaining essential elements of their traditional social organization. The Kushan experience demonstrates that nomadic societies possessed sophisticated political capabilities that enabled successful adaptation to complex administrative requirements without abandoning their cultural identities or military advantages. The transformation from tribal confederation to imperial administration achieved by Kushan rulers reveals the flexibility and adaptability of nomadic political institutions when confronted with the challenges of governing diverse sedentary populations across vast territories. The preservation of tribal consultation mechanisms within imperial administrative structures created hybrid governmental systems that combined nomadic consensus-building traditions with bureaucratic efficiency requirements, establishing models for political organisation that influenced subsequent Central Asian political development. The military innovations developed by Kushan armies demonstrate the capacity of nomadic societies to adapt their traditional tactical advantages to diverse combat environments, while incorporating technological innovations from sedentary military traditions. The synthesis of nomadic cavalry mobility with siege warfare techniques, urban combat capabilities, and logistical systems suitable for extended campaigns across varied terrain established military organizational principles that influenced warfare throughout Central Asia for centuries. The Kushan Empire's ultimate fragmentation resulted not from inherent weaknesses in nomadic political organization, but from the extraordinary challenges of maintaining unified authority across territories that exceeded the communication and transportation capabilities available to ancient political systems. The empire's territorial extent, spanning over 2,000 kilometers from east to west and encompassing radically different geographic, economic, and cultural environments, created administrative challenges that would have strained any contemporary political system. The legacy of Kushan achievements in creating the first truly international empire in Central Asian history established precedents for cultural synthesis, religious tolerance, and commercial organization that continued influencing regional development long after the collapse of unified imperial authority. The artistic traditions, architectural innovations, religious institutions, and commercial practices developed under Kushan patronage created lasting foundations for Central Asian civilization that persisted through subsequent political transformations while adapting to changing cultural and economic conditions. The Kushan Empire represents a unique chapter in world history, demonstrating that nomadic societies possessed the political sophistication and cultural adaptability necessary to create complex imperial systems that successfully integrated diverse populations while facilitating unprecedented levels of international cultural and commercial exchange. Their achievements in creating sustainable frameworks for cross-cultural cooperation established models for international relations that remain relevant to contemporary efforts at creating inclusive multinational institutions capable of addressing global challenges while respecting cultural diversity and local autonomy.